It's a bright and refreshing morning as two students head into a shop. Hearing a quick welcome as they step inside, breakfast is on the stove with eggs and sausages sizzling away, looking like a perfect meal. But something is definitely wrong because the girl cooking is a total mess. She's standing there with a spatula, crying her eyes out and thinking about how dark her life feels. She actually starts talking to the food, asking the fried egg if it's on her side. She tells the egg it's the only thing that gets her pain, which makes her look pretty crazy while she works. She starts thinking back to where it all went south, back to her graduation ceremony 6 months ago. The guys eating breakfast just watch her spiraling. One points out she's doing it again, while the other admits he feels for her, but it's getting old. Back in her memory, Lydia stands frozen with a look of pure shock on her face as someone starts to deliver some life-changing news. The whole graduation party is buzzing with gossip. Lydia is just standing there alone, watching the guy she was supposed to be with. It's Crown Prince Stefan, and he's making a huge scene. He yells at the top of his lungs that he's officially breaking off their engagement, and he doesn't stop there. He accuses her of being a bully, claiming he knows she's been targeting a girl named Francois just because of her family. Stefan looks right at Lydia and tells her she's unfit to be queen because she has no magic. He says Francois is the real deal since she inherited their family's power, which makes Francois speak up, telling the prince to please stop what he's doing. She sounds like she's trying to keep the peace, but then she starts crying, telling him not to worry about her. She says it's only natural that her sister finds her bothersome, and she keeps going, telling everyone that her sister's bullying was actually unbearable agony. It's a total act, but then she puts on a big smile and says she's going to forgive her sister for everything right here on the spot, making the whole crowd lose it. Everyone starts clapping and calling her a kind-hearted saint who's perfect for the throne, while Stefan stands there looking proud of her. Behind her hand, Francois is actually smirking and laughing at how well her plan worked, leaving Lydia spiraling in her head, wondering when she ever actually bullied her. She feels like she was the one who never belonged at school or at home, mostly because her family, the Resto house, is famous for having the holy healing powers of the goddess, so everyone expected her to be an amazing saint since she was the oldest daughter. But that's where everything started to fall apart. Lydia looks back on her past and remembers how she didn't have even a tiny bit of magic, especially since the one who actually woke up with the power of a saint was her half-sister Francois. Francois was the child of a mistress her father was with after her mother died, but in a family of priests like theirs, having that saint power is the only thing that matters. So one of the maids finds young Lydia sitting on the floor and calls out her name, while the poor kid realizes that her father, her stepmother, and all the staff are only looking out for Francois. The maid just looks down at her with total disgust and tells her she's getting in the way. Nearby, everyone is celebrating Francois' birthday with a huge feast, telling her she can have whatever she wants, leaving Lydia hiding in the shadows with her stomach growling, just wishing she had something to eat while someone rubs Francois' head and tells her she's the pride of the entire Resto family. Young Lydia stands in the hallway, hearing someone call her a total failure and realizing she was always completely alone in that house. Even though she didn't have a spark of magic, she spent every night working herself to the bone because she didn't want to bring any shame to the Resto family. She just wanted to be good enough for Prince Stefan. So she studied until she was exhausted, honestly believing that all this effort would actually mean something one day. Back in the present, Lydia begs them to believe her. She's completely crushed because after trying so hard for years, she's being called out for something she didn't even do. She asks what she's actually guilty of, but nobody listens, making her wonder if it's just okay to treat people like trash as long as they don't have magic. The tears start falling as she wonders if she even has the right to be happy at all, especially since her own father called her a useless wretch, telling her he never even saw her as his daughter. She remembers him as a cheater, standing there while his mistress and his favorite daughter, Francois, took everything away. Lydia remembers Prince Stefan promising to protect her with a smile, but now she knows he's just a total liar. She runs off into the darkness, screaming how much she hates him, convinced that every man is exactly the same. After the engagement was trashed, she didn't even bother going back to her house. She just started running and kept walking aimlessly through the streets. She's stuck wondering how she's even supposed to survive on her own, feeling completely hopeless. She asks herself what someone like her can even do when they don't have any magic, but suddenly she stops in her tracks. A really good smell catches her attention and she looks through a window, seeing a bunch of people inside a restaurant just hanging out and eating together. She stares at a plate of hot food and some stew, whispering to herself about how delicious it looks. And as she watches a couple having a good time at their table, something finally clicks. Lydia stands there with a blank look on her face, realizing that she actually remembers something important from her past. Lydia stands there thinking about how she learned to cook just by watching people, mostly because she barely got fed at her own house. She realizes cooking is her only real skill and decides to open up a diner. Even though she feels like nobody has ever needed her before, she thinks maybe she can finally make someone smile with her food. It's a fresh start, so she vows to never go back home and starts smiling, ready to live life exactly how she wants. She's all in on the idea, but there's a darker side to her cooking style because she thinks the secret to great food is soaking up all the pain and grudges from women who hate men. She ends up opening a place called Diner Lobelia, a nice little shop that she tucked away in a quiet corner of the royal capital 6 months after her engagement was ruined. She really wanted to create a peaceful spot where ladies and mothers could just relax and have a good time. Lydia stands in the middle of her new shop looking completely overwhelmed because the place is suddenly packed with nothing but huge, muscular holy knights, which wasn't exactly the vibe she was going for. She realizes things rarely go according to plan as the knights start calling out their orders for breakfast sets, so she tells them she's on it. Even though it's not the fancy shop she dreamed of, she's still happy to have people eating her food, and it actually looks pretty good. She brings out a plate and tells the guy thanks for waiting, then serves up what she calls a dark fried egg with a side of hatred and grudge sausage. The customers just stare at the food, totally confused by the dark names she's giving the breakfast specials, but one of them speaks up and tells Lydia the meal looks delicious again today. It turns out the guy is Lucian Kirkcade, the captain of the Holy Knights, and he's been showing up here a lot lately. Lydia looks pretty tired of seeing him and gives him a dry thanks for his hard work every morning, but Lucian keeps trying to recruit her for his night order. She turns him down flat, telling him to just eat his food and go home. Lucian is totally beaming and tells Lydia he was right. Her cooking has some kind of secret power. Lydia just lists off the menu, calling it a dark fried egg and grudge demon bread, making it sound as bitter as possible. Lucian looks a little shook and thinks the food is amazing, but the negative vibes are just too much. He really feels for her, so Lydia admits she just wanted a cute shop and good food, but all her bitterness is leaking into the cooking, though Lucian insists it still tastes great. She knows the names she's giving the food are a bit much, but she's just leaned into the questionable vibe for now. Lucian explains that eating here actually gives the knights a massive boost. They're taking down huge monsters easier and barely getting hurt anymore. He's sitting there with his crew and says he's pretty sure her breakfast specials are actually buffing their strength and healing, but Lydia doesn't want to hear it and tells him he's wrong. He gives her a wink and asks her to come join their next expedition as a chef, but she just shuts him down instantly. Lydia is totally over it and tells Lucian his weird rumors are the reason she's getting so many strange customers lately. Lucian points out that the rumors didn't just come from him. Other people are starting to notice how much power her cooking has, and Lydia realizes that every single day, this guy tries to recruit her by using his good looks and his charming voice to get his way. Lucian starts to tell her he doesn't care about the details, but Lydia is stuck on the fact that she doesn't even have magic, so having powers is impossible. He tells her she's totally misunderstanding what he's trying to say, then he gets real close, grabs her hand, and asks if she'll just make breakfast for him every day like it's some big romantic gesture. Lydia shuts him down instantly with a hard no. She sees right through it and knows he just wants a housekeeper for his night squad. She's not having it at all, especially since the night order is run by the royal family, which is the last place she wants to be. Lydia knows that if she takes a job there, it's only a matter of time before she runs into her enemies, Prince Stefan and Francois. She's dead set on keeping things simple and living a quiet life on her own terms, staying right where she belongs, working at her little public diner Lobelia. Lucian admits he knows the villainous diner matters to her, but Lydia snaps back, telling him to stop using that weird name and call it Lobelia. Just then, a young girl named Shannon bursts in and starts chewing Lucian out for making Lydia cry again. She's a regular who helps out. Lucian just smiles and says good morning, jokingly pointing out that Lydia actually cries pretty much every day, even though Lydia tries to deny it. Lydia quickly pulls herself together and puts on a big smile. She tells Shannon she's done crying and gives her a warm welcome. Looking at the little girl, Lydia notices that she's showing up to the shop way earlier than usual today, and Shannon explains that her mom had to head to work early, so she just felt a bit lonely and decided to come over to the diner. Lydia can't help but think how adorable Shannon is. It's a nice change of pace having another girl around in such a rough, manly place. Shannon keeps pouting and tells Lucian to quit being so mean, but he just brushes it off, saying he's not the only one to blame for the tears. He sits down in front of a fresh plate of eggs and sausages, starting his morning prayer by thanking the divine ancestor and Lydia for the meal he's about to have. He closes his eyes with a peaceful look, finally ready to enjoy the food she made him. Lucian starts his breakfast, pressing a fork into the soft egg yolk until it breaks and runs over the plate. He takes a bite and his face immediately flushes red. He admits the food is actually really good. Lucian looks totally satisfied with the meal, while Lydia stands close by with a teapot just watching him enjoy himself. Lydia closes her eyes and smiles, thinking about how much she honestly loves moments like this. She realizes that seeing people enjoy her food and calling it delicious is what keeps her going even when she's feeling down. But Lucien totally kills the vibe by casually asking if she heard that Prince Stefan is getting ready to marry Francois at the palace. He mentions the engagement was already announced, and Lydia just goes cold, saying she knows and secretly wishing Francois would just drop dead. Lucien sees her getting worked up and tells her to calm down, though he immediately takes it back and says she actually shouldn't. He jokes that if her anger makes the food taste this good, he should tell her more about her sister, but Lydia snaps that she doesn't want to hear it. Regardless, Lucien keeps going, mentioning how Francois is being treated like a total saint and is loved by absolutely everyone lately. Francois puts on a show for the local noble ladies, acting like a total saint, while word spreads that her bully sister is finally reflecting on her crimes as a commoner. Lucien keeps eating while quoting how Francois fake cries and asks everyone to forgive her sister. Lydia starts sweating because the rumors sound exactly like something her sister would cook up. Lucien explains that's why people call this place the Villainous Diner, especially with that weird name. Lydia cuts him off, arguing that the lobelia flower actually represents stuff like humility and being pure. She claims the name fits her perfectly since she's basically an iron virgin at this point. Lucien finishes his meal and deadpans that an iron maiden is actually just a torture device. Lydia loses it and yells that she just meant she's staying single for the rest of her life. She finishes her rant by shouting that she's done with men because they're all just cheaters. Lucien tries to play devil's advocate, arguing that there have to be some loyal guys out there. He brings up the old legends of the divine ancestor, Lord Theobald, who supposedly only had eyes for goddess Alexandria, but Lydia isn't buying it for a second. She gets all red-faced and yells that he only stayed loyal because he was a literal god, which makes him way different from any normal guy, and she starts physically shoving him toward the exit, telling him to get lost if he's done eating. Lucien just smiles and thanks her for the meal while the other knights laugh about their captain hitting on her again. But before he leaves, Lucien reaches out and gently catches a strand of her hair, calling out her name and pulls her into his space. He thanks her for the day and tells her to pray for his safety, calling her his personal goddess of victory, which leaves Lydia completely short-circuited. She just stands there shaking and blushing like crazy while Shannon watches the whole meltdown from the back, as Lucien finally walks away, casually waving to his men like he didn't just drop a massive bomb on the girl. The second he's gone, Lydia finds her voice and screams at the top of her lungs that men are the absolute worst. The diner finally closes up for the night, and things quiet down once the closed sign is flipped over, but the peace doesn't last long. Lydia realizes those nights ate so much that the shop is now facing a total meat crisis. Lydia checks the empty fridge and decides she needs to hit the butcher right away. She asks Shannon if she wants to tag along, but the kid says she's gotta head home to help her family out. So Lydia heads out on her own, walking through the streets with her shopping basket while looking up at the night sky. High above the Bernard Kingdom, two moons hang in the air. One is a normal white, while the other glows a deep red, and it's from that red moon that monsters fall down to threaten everyone. People say it looks like the moon is crying, so they call the event the Moon's Tears, which is tied back to an old legend about a witch named Sylphina. She was in love with the divine ancestor, but she got so jealous that she hurt the goddess Alexandria and tried to wreck the whole world, so the ancestor and the goddess teamed up to stop her. They ended up trapping the witch inside that red moon to keep the world safe. But the tears falling from the sky are actually just the physical form of the witch's pure hatred. That hate is what births the monsters that keep attacking the kingdom. As long as that red moon is up there, the witch is going to keep resenting the world and dropping monsters on everyone. And Lydia realizes these attacks have been happening way more often lately. She starts feeling a bit bad for Lucien and his knights, knowing they must be working overtime, but then she remembers Lucien teasing her earlier. He told her to watch out, joking that if she keeps hating the prince so much, she might just turn into a witch herself. Lydia pushes open the door to the butcher's shop with a loud creak, calling out a quick hello as she steps inside, and Margaret is right there waiting, sitting comfortably in the back of the shop with a friendly welcome. Lydia's face lights up as she greets Margaret, holding her shopping basket tight while asking for some meat, since Margaret is basically like a big sister to her. She's the one who gave Lydia a place to stay and a job after that whole mess with the prince, so Lydia starts listing off everything she needs, from sheep intestines to pork and even some lemons for a special sausage, which Margaret thinks sounds like a great meal. But there's a specific reason for the heavy recipe, because Lydia admits this is actually a grudge sausage aimed at Lucien. She's annoyed that he flirts with her every single day, and Margaret realizes the guy is just a natural lady killer without even knowing it. And then Margaret mentions the gossip about Lucien apparently dating every girl he saves, though it's mostly just talk, but that's enough for Lydia, who loses it and shouts about how men are seriously the worst. She's so done with the whole gender that she mutters about wishing they'd all just disappear, leaving Margaret just watching her vent. Margaret just smiles, thinking about how much of a handful Lydia can be before telling her she's got this and offers to tell her fortune right then and there. Lydia asks if she's seriously doing her specialty magic now, but Margaret says it's no big deal. Lydia's eyes go wide as Margaret pulls out these glowing cards. She can't believe she's seeing real magic happening right in front of her. Margaret closes her eyes while the cards float around, calling on the major arcana to show what's coming for the girl. And soon, the magician card pops up. Margaret looks at it for a second, seeing the result of the reading clearly. She explains it stands for new beginnings and tells Lydia she's going to meet someone amazing soon. Lydia's a bit confused but thanks her anyway. Lydia heads out and starts walking home down the quiet street, just as a mysterious figure watches her from the shadows. The person hiding in the dark whispers her name as she passes by, sounding like they've been looking for her. It's a guy in a fancy dark cloak who looks like he belongs in a palace, just standing there watching her go. He stares after her with a serious look, quietly saying her full name as she disappears into the distance. The open sign hangs on the door as the shop gets ready for the day. Lydia steps inside to start her shift, unaware that the hooded guy from the street is still watching her every move. He just stands there with a really serious look on his face, keeping his eyes locked on her. Inside the kitchen, a meat grinder sits on the counter ready to be used. Lydia looks completely different now. She has this scary look in her eyes as she says it's time for judgment and tells her target to prepare. She starts grinding away, thinking to herself that while the pork is innocent, a cheating man is just straight up sinful. Lydia cranks the handle like crazy, venting about how Lucian is the absolute worst for messing with a girl's feelings. She keeps going, deciding that Lucian is just another jerk like her dad and Prince Stefan, and honestly thinks all guys are the same. She finishes stuffing a sausage while yelling for him to learn his lesson. Holding up the finished meat, she calls it her grudge sausage for that womanizer Lucian, while Margaret watches and asks if something actually went down between them. Lucian stands right in the doorway wearing that dark hooded cloak. Lydia is totally frozen and shocked to see him there, while he just stares back with a dead serious expression. She starts shaking and stammers out a welcome, asking what he wants to order before losing it and yelling to ask who he even is. Lydia tries to figure out if he's just a customer, but then starts panicking and tells him he's not even allowed to be in the kitchen. Right then, Lucian reaches out and grabs her hand out of nowhere. Lydia's whole face turns bright red and she starts tearing up from the shock, and Lucian finally pulls his hood back, looking at her and asking why she's even crying. She doesn't hold back and just yells that it's because she's scared. She tells him straight up that anyone would be terrified if a guy just burst into a store and grabbed them like this. Lucian leans in way too close, leaving Lydia panicking because she realized she's dealing with a really good-looking pervert. Lydia is totally red in the face and tells him her hand is all sticky, asking him to please just let go, but instead, he just holds on and quietly says purification to use his magic. Lydia can't believe he just used a spell without saying an incantation and looks at her sparkly hands, thinking it's amazing how he just apologizes and admits he got a bit ahead of himself. He says he's sorry for the late introduction and finally tells her his name is Seal Vermilion, a mage, giving her this soft, charming smile that's almost too much to handle. Lydia looks at his outfit and asks if he's a court mage, and Seal tells her she's sharp, confirming he's actually the head court mage, which makes Lydia realize she's literally talking to the highest-ranking person in the whole mage corps. This organization, called St. Weiss, is under the direct control of the royals and stands on the same level as Lucian's knights, meaning while the knights are out there taking down monsters, Seal's group stays busy with research and their own special duties. Seal explains that his status shouldn't change anything and he didn't mean to scare her, so he casually says her name, making Lydia realize he definitely knows who she is, and she figures Francois must be the one spreading all those rumors about her back at the castle. Seal leans in way too close and asks for help because he heard her cooking has some kind of secret power, but Lydia totally loses it, telling him her food is normal and his sense of personal space is a mess just because he's cute. He looks pretty desperate and asks her to just hear him out, so she finally gives in and says she will listen, but that's it, which makes Seal look super relieved as he thanks her. Lydia admits she isn't a fan of men, but she can't just ignore someone in trouble, even if she thinks she won't be much help. Seal starts his story by saying he went to hunt a four-headed Medusa just for fun the other day, and Lydia mentions she heard those things are cursed, but she's mostly confused why it had 4 heads when they usually only have 1. Seal continues his story, mentioning he never knew a 4-headed Medusa could spread a death curse, so he brought the monster's head back to the royal palace to study it, leaving Lydia looking completely shocked. He looks down at his hands, explaining the curse was eating away at his body like a slow-acting poison without him even noticing until the first major symptom hit, and he completely lost his sense of taste. Lydia can't believe what she's hearing and asks if he really can't taste anything at all, which leads to Seal confirming that his sight started going right after his taste, which is why he can't see her face clearly. Lydia finally understands why he was standing so close, but then she starts panicking and asks if he's going to die. He tells her it's not quite like that, but his senses are definitely fading out. Seal lets out a heavy sigh, saying it's pretty miserable to think he might never taste food again, and Lydia can't help but agree that's a huge deal. He admits that no kind of healing or curse-breaking magic worked on him, which is why he went looking for her after hearing rumors about her food from the knights. Lydia looks at him and feels genuinely bad for his situation, even if she knows he basically did this to himself. Seal stops for a second and just says her name, Lydia. He looks her right in the eyes and tells her he needs her to break the curse that's been put on him. Lydia stands there completely frozen, unable to process what he just asked because she immediately starts panicking, yelling that it's impossible and there is just no way she can do something that big. The thought of breaking a curse from a four-headed Medusa is terrifying to her. She tells herself there is no way someone like her could pull off something that even a top-tier mage who doesn't even need to chant couldn't handle. Seal looks down, his expression getting real heavy as he tells her that she is honestly their only hope left, which leaves Lydia feeling the massive weight of his expectation. It's a lot to take in, and it makes her think back to her childhood when her father told her she had absolutely no magic power. As she stares at her hands, she realizes that for the first time in her life, someone is actually counting on her, the family outcast, to do something important. She remembers all the old rumors about her, with people whispering about how the priest's oldest daughter was magicless and wondering why she was even born into a family like theirs. Everyone used to call her useless and a disappointment for not having the saint's blessing. But now, that's all changing because she's finally being relied on by someone who needs her. Lydia remembers her sister Francois mocking her, saying that being totally alone is the perfect spot for a big sister who can't do anything right. The weight of it all hits her hard, and she starts crying, thinking about how she just doesn't have the kind of power anyone needs. Even if someone finally relies on her, she's convinced she'll just let them down because Seal reaches out and gently tilts her head up, asking why she's even crying. Lydia can barely get the words out, trying to explain that she's just terrified. The idea of failing to meet his expectations is eating her alive, especially when she realizes all she can really do is cook ordinary, everyday food that anyone could make, which makes her feel completely useless, since Seal can't even see her face or taste the food she's so worried about. Seal just smiles like it's no big deal and says he gets it, but then he asks her if she'll just go ahead and make that food for him anyway. He tells her that literally anything she makes is fine with him, he just wants a huge serving of whatever she's got ready. Lydia blushes as he wipes a tear away, telling him she can definitely handle the cooking, but she's still unsure why he's being so nice until he gives her a warm look and officially introduces himself, telling her he didn't come for a miracle. He just came to eat at her restaurant. Lydia feels his warm hands on her face and hears his gentle voice, and it starts to really sink in that since Lord Seal came here specifically to eat, she needs to treat him like a proper guest and make the best meal possible. So, she wipes her eyes and pulls herself together as Seal watches her getting straight to work. She holds up a bowl of ingredients and asks him if he's a fan of meat. She decides to start by boiling the grudge sausage, then stops to think for a second before suggesting they have hamburger steak too, which leaves Seal just staring at her in silence for a moment. He gives her a charming smile and asks if he can stay right there, promising he won't be in the way since he just wants to watch her work from up close. Lydia's face turns bright red and she tells herself she won't be fooled. Then she snaps at him, saying he's wrong if he thinks his good looks will make her fall for him that easily. As she drops the food into the boiling water, she starts wondering if every group leader is just a natural womanizer, immediately thinking about how Lucien is exactly the same way. She ends up taking her frustration out on the cooking, muttering about how it's all Lucien's fault for spreading those weird rumors in the first place. Lydia stands over the stove boiling sausages, thinking about how she just wanted a quiet life, but now all these guys are crowding her shop for magical effects that don't even exist, and the fact that it's nothing but men showing up really starts to get on her nerves, making her wish they'd all just get cursed or something. Seal overhears her and casually asks if she means she wants them to die, which sends Lydia into a total panic as she tries to explain she didn't mean anything that dark. She tells him she was thinking more along the lines of them stubbing their toes on a dresser, and Seal just looks at her, calling that a pretty weak curse. Lydia gets a dark look in her eyes while holding a kitchen knife, admitting she actually does want her father and the prince to have a miserable time. So she starts taking all that built-up hatred out on the cooking, slamming a pile of meat into a bowl while muttering to herself about how the food needs to soak up all her bitterness and turn it into something delicious. She starts kneading the meat with way too much energy, cursing the prince for lying about liking her, and deciding he's an enemy to all women who just needs to disappear. Seal watches her work and calmly points out that she basically wants the prince torn to shreds just like that minced meat, which honestly just creeps her out. He just gives her this big, charming smile and says he was only offering to help with that as thanks for the meal, but Lydia isn't having it, wondering what kind of psycho thanks that is supposed to be. Lydia starts shaking, begging Seal to stop, saying he'll destroy the world just to thank her for the bed and food, but Seal tries to apologize, saying he was just joking to lighten the mood, though Lydia snaps back that it didn't sound like a joke at all. She turns her focus back to the stove, where the meat is sizzling in the pan, and Seal watches her work, telling her she's really skilled and that her hands are basically magic, which leads him to ask why the eldest daughter of the famous resto priest family is even the one doing the cooking. So Lydia looks down at the food and quietly admits that no one ever actually cooked for her. Seal looks at her with a confused expression, asking what she means by that, and Lydia gives him a sad smile while explaining her father gave up on her early because she was a failure who couldn't use magic. She remembers being treated like she didn't exist in that house, standing alone as a kid while everyone else just walked past her. It felt like she was just air drifting around, completely unseen and gone from everyone's hearts. Lydia explains that while things weren't exactly dire, not being able to eat was a huge problem, so she decided to take matters into her own hands by watching the family cooks and sneaking into the kitchen alone, and it all started with her learning how to make simple fried eggs. She remembers that being the first time she ever got to have warm rice, and even though she says it was delicious, Seal just stares at her with a look of total pity. Moving back to the present, Lydia announces that the food is finally ready, showing off a crazy menu of anger scallion rice and grudge sausages aimed right at Lucien. She finishes the serving by adding a bowl of normal vegetable soup on the side. Seal picks up his fork and knife to try a bite of the grudge food, while Lydia watches him closely, getting nervous and asking if something is wrong or if it's too hard to eat. Seal looks at the food and pretends his eyes have suddenly failed him, claiming he has no idea where anything is, and he asks Lydia if she can help him eat, which she immediately agrees to without a second thought. Lydia starts feeding him by hand, blushing like crazy while Seal happily takes a bite. And after tasting it, Seal smiles warmly and tells Lydia the food is great, describing the flavors of the meat and tomatoes. Lydia is completely shocked that he can actually taste her cooking, but Seal just calmly confirms it. Then he tells her he's glad he finally got to see her face and that she's actually really cute, making Lydia lose it as she jumps up from the table while Seal keeps thanking her for the meal. She stands there shaking and blushing as Seal watches her reaction, so she starts yelling that she's only acting like this because she's hungry, which just makes Seal laugh. Finally, Seal gives her a huge smile and asks her to stay so they can finish the meal together. Lydia tries to justify things to herself, thinking she only stayed because Lord Seal asked her to, and she felt like she didn't have any other choice, but deep down, something feels different. As they eat, she realizes that sharing a meal with someone actually makes her feel pretty happy. The meal finishes up with an empty bowl on the table as they both say thanks for the food. Seal tells her that was probably the best meal he's ever had and that he finally gets why Lucien visits her every single day. He gets serious and tells her that the rumors are actually true, her cooking really does have a special power. Then he drops a bombshell, asking Lydia if she'll come with him, which leaves her completely stunned. Lydia is totally spiraling as Seal explains he wants her to cook for his subordinates who are suffering from the same curse he has, and she quickly puts the pieces together, realizing he's talking about the St. Weiss members back at the royal palace. She starts panicking and yelling that it's impossible and she won't do it, telling Lord Seal he's got the wrong idea about her. Seal suddenly scoops Lydia up into his arms, catching her totally off guard as she lets out a loud shout. Lydia completely loses it, her eyes spinning in circles as she yells at him, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing. Seal just tells her he's sorry, but he needs her to come with him right now, leaving her panicked and speechless. She screams for him to put her down, her voice echoing all the way through the quiet streets of the town. Just then, Lydia spots her friends nearby and gasps, hoping they might be able to step in and help her out. But Shannon is just standing there stunned, while Margaret blushes and says oh my, clearly getting the wrong idea about what's happening. Lydia desperately calls out to them and begs for help, but it's already too late. A massive magic circle starts glowing under their feet, and Seal triggers a teleportation spell that begins to whisk them away. In an instant, they vanish from the shop and show up right in front of the massive Bernal Kingdom royal castle. Seal lets out a tired sigh, saying he knew it would be like this, while Lydia complains that this is exactly why she didn't want to do this. Lydia stares at the massive building in front of them and says she never wanted to come back to this place again. It hits her that they've walked straight into the enemy's base. She's terrified being back where it all started, and she totally loses it, crying and screaming that she wants to go home right now. This is the Bernard Royal Palace, basically the main hideout for the prince and Francois, the people she hates most. Lydia just keeps repeating to herself that she really thought she'd never have to set foot in this place ever again. Seal looks her right in the eye and tells her to quiet down, warning her that the prince will notice them if she keeps making a scene. Lydia immediately shuts up and makes a sour face, pouting while she tries to hold back her tears. She thinks about how cruel this is and wonders if he's actually trying to threaten her. Seal ignores her attitude and just keeps walking, carrying her deeper through the stone hallways of the castle. Lydia can't stop worrying, thinking about how bad this is for her since she was supposed to be living quietly in hiding. She's terrified she'll run into the prince or Francois. Seal apologizes for the rough trip and asks her to just bear with it for now. His footsteps hitting the floor as Lydia realizes she's a mess and tells him her clothes are completely in tatters. She's blushing like crazy while he carries her, and Seal explains that teleportation magic is rough on clothes because of the shock, though he's fine since he's the one who cast it. Lydia thinks that's awful and wonders why he would even use magic like that. Seal just says it would have been a huge hassle if she made a scene in town, while she complains that he's being way too forceful. Her boots finally hit the ground and she lets out a sigh of relief, glad that he finally put her down. Seal stops and tells her he's sorry, but the truth is he's actually getting pretty desperate right now. He looks back at her with a serious expression and says he really needs her help. And as he opens the heavy doors, he asks her to save his subordinates who were cursed right along with him. He points toward the first person and Lydia stands there frozen, barely able to process the fact that they've all been hit with a curse. The room is huge, filled with rows of beds and people suffering from the same dark magic. The room is set up like a massive hospital ward, with staff moving quickly between the rows of beds where cursed soldiers are struggling. Two guys with dark marks on their skin stand over a patient, but it doesn't look like they can do much. The patient is just lying there in total agony, while Lydia stands there with her hand over her mouth. She's completely shocked by how many people are suffering, and she asks if the curse is really that bad, wondering if it's more than just losing their sight or being unable to taste food. Seal looks down with a pretty grim expression. He tells her that most of them can't even move anymore because their senses are totally paralyzed, and so far, no treatment has worked. Lydia can't help but shout that it's not true, her voice cutting through the heavy silence of the room. Seal just stands there looking crushed. He says it's all his fault for letting the curse spread like this, explaining that everything happened because he was the one who brought back a Medusa's head, and now he's stuck watching his own people rot because he can't do a single thing to help them. Seal looks right at Lydia and tells her she's the only hope he has left, and he apologizes for dragging her into this mess so suddenly, while explaining that his only wish right now is to save the men under his command. With a look of pure desperation, he asks her if she would be willing to cook for them. Lydia just stands there completely frozen, trying to process what he just said. She clenches her fist tight, starting to respond to him, but Seal keeps going, saying he needs her to break the curse and that she's his only shot. He smiles gently and brings up how her food tasted, mentioning the rich meat and the sweet tomatoes, which makes Lydia tear up as she wonders if she can actually believe in herself for once. She prays silently, worrying that Seal's recovery was just luck and that her cooking might not really save anyone. Lydia stands there thinking she might actually just be totally useless after all. But Seal grabs her hands and looks her right in the eyes, telling her that her cooking has real power and he's going to prove it. She looks down at his hands and realizes Seal has been acting desperate ever since he first showed up at her diner. So she starts feeling bad for ignoring him and staying bitter about the past while she was convinced she was the only one suffering. It makes her wonder if it's finally time to start believing in herself and in Seal too. Looking around at all the sick people in the room, she worries she won't meet his expectations, but seeing them like this makes her want to help even though she's scared, because if her food has even a tiny chance of working, she's got to try. She clenches her fists and looks up, telling him straight out that she's going to give it a shot. Lydia warns him she isn't sure it'll go well, but Seal just beams at her and says she's their only hope, and then he asks her right then and there if she can make a hamburg steak for the men. Lydia looks totally caught off guard and repeats the order back to him, making sure she heard right about the hamburg steak. Seal stands there and explains his theory, telling her he's convinced the magic in her food comes directly from her own two hands, and Lydia stares at her palms like she can't believe it. But Seal doubles down, saying if she makes the dish herself, that curse-breaking power will definitely be in there. He looks her in the eye and promises to take full responsibility for the whole situation. So he starts being brutally honest, admitting he basically dragged her to the palace and showed her the sick nights because he knew she was too kind to walk away. Lydia just listens as he tells her she doesn't have to be afraid, and that it's actually totally fine if she wants to be angry or even hate him for it. He gives her a little smile and asks her to just keep cooking while resenting him, just like she's been doing this whole time. She doesn't say anything back, but her face is totally red as she tries to process everything he just threw at her. And without another word, she turns her back to him and heads straight for the kitchen counter to get things moving. She wastes no time and starts prepping the meat, focused on getting those steaks ready as fast as possible. Lydia looks down, feeling a bit heavy as she mentions she never actually wanted to step foot in the royal palace again. She snaps out of it and starts scolding Seal, telling him that kidnapping her the first time they met and ruining her clothes is definitely going too far. Seal looks totally defeated, hanging his head as he gives her a genuine apology for everything he did to get her there. Lydia's voice gets a bit quieter as she admits she doesn't really have much confidence in herself, or if she even has these special powers he's talking about, but she shakes it off and finds her spark, clenching her fist and shouting that she's still going to give it her absolute best shot. Seal just stands there in silence, looking at her with this soft, surprised expression like he wasn't expecting her to be so determined. Lydia gets right to work and asks how many servings she needs to prep, and Seal tells her to make enough for 20 people, which gets her thinking about how she just needs to be herself, and how easy it is to tap into that anger she feels towards Stefan and Francois. She has a sudden realization that she's really back at the palace, the one place she tried to move on from, and as she starts slapping the meat into patties, she can't help but feel a little down because the whole atmosphere just brings back the worst memories. Lydia starts prepping the meat, thinking about how Stefan was actually decent right after they got engaged. She was so full of hope back then, which just makes everything now feel even worse. Seal asks if she still has feelings for the prince, but she tells him to just get the pans ready. The meat hits the pan with a loud sizzle as Lydia makes it clear that she doesn't actually like the guy anymore, and she explains he was only ever kind to her before he met Francois, so she's convinced he was definitely cheating. With a look of total dark determination, she declares that men will always cheat. She's finally reached the truth of the world, leading Seal to act all impressed, saying she figured out something he couldn't grasp after 10 years of research. Lydia doesn't stop, waving her spatula and yelling about how guys really just want flashy, cute girls in the end, and then her eyes go completely dark. Just knowing Stefan is nearby in the palace makes her boil with pure hatred, so she tells herself she just needs to focus and channel all that pain, even if she has to fake a real injury. Moving on, the palace dining room is fully prepped for the meal. Lydia gets herself pumped up and ready to go. She keeps in mind that since patients are going to be eating this meal, she decides to keep it light and seasons the meat with a refreshing sauce made of soy sauce and grated daikon radish, which finishes the dish. She announces it's finally ready, calling it her angry 20-serving Hamburg steak because she's still a bit salty about Seal kidnapping her, even if it was for a good cause. The men sit at the table as one of them calls out to Seal. It's Levis Mistalinia, the adjutant for the mage squadron. He looks pretty rough and asks if a meal like this is actually going to save everyone, but Seal doesn't hesitate. He tells the guy he guarantees it works because he's already felt the effects of Lydia's cooking firsthand. Levis is still a little skeptical, mentioning how Seal was the first one hit by the curse and could barely even walk. He asks if Seal is really fully recovered, so Seal just tells him to stop doubting and take a bite. Levis gives in and starts cutting into the steak like he's told. The second he tries a piece, it's like a bolt of lightning hits him. He can't help but yell out about how good it is, and he starts losing it over the flavor. He describes it as refreshing and mellow, saying the juice from the beef is perfect with that radish sauce. Lydia thanks them for the compliments. She's actually pretty shocked by how hyped up everyone is over her food. Levis is losing it over the flavor. He can actually feel the heavy, gross feeling of the curse leaving his body. One of the other guys at the table is just as stunned. He lets out a shout as the food starts working on him too. Levis is completely floored by how strong the curse-breaking power is. He's never had anything this effective that also tasted this good. He turns to Seal and asks who this girl even is. Seal just casually mentions she's a cook from the Lobelia diner, which leads Seal to tell Levis to take a breather. He formally introduces her as Lydia, and then Seal comes clean about how he basically kidnapped her from the diner. He makes sure to mention that even though she was scared, she still worked hard to cook for them. Levis hears that and feels terrible. He looks down and tells her he's honestly so sorry for everything that happened. He admits their own bad judgment is what caused all this mess for both Seal and Lydia. The rest of the guys just stand there in silence. Lydia watches them bow their heads. She feels a little awkward seeing these tough guys act so humble. One of the knights mentions how everyone in the Saint Corps actually got cursed twice because of Seal, which makes Levis turn to Lydia and ask what kind of story Seal even told her. He tries to defend his boss, saying it wasn't his fault, but Lydia is just standing there totally lost. Seal starts sweating and tries to tell Levis to shut it, but Lydia is already suspicious and wants to know exactly what they're talking about. She gets right in Seal's face and asks if he's been lying this whole time. She's pretty annoyed that he'd keep secrets after literally kidnapping her from the diner. Lydia loses her cool and shouts about how she hates men because they're all liars. Seal can only watch her walk away while he tries to think of something to say. The mood gets heavy as the truth comes out about Seal bringing back the head of a four-headed Medusa. Turns out there's this terrifying sickness going around the capital lately, and most people call it the curse of the moon. It works just like the monsters that come from the red moon, making people turn violent until their entire soul basically becomes a monster. Lydia listens in shock as they explain they were investigating the curse when that Medusa thing actually happened. Levis gets fired up and explains how that monster destroyed an entire village in a single night. He tells her Seal headed out to kill it all alone. Seal just looks awkward and tries to get him to stop. Seal looks down, admitting he had a specific reason for bringing that monster's head back. He thought that if they studied how Medusa's curse worked, they might finally find a way to break the moon's curse since they're both so similar. He gets serious for a second and tells Lydia that everything he's telling her right now is actually a huge state secret. Lydia listens, looking pretty worried as Seal explains how they have to track down and capture anyone who gets hit by the curse. He puts a finger to his lips and says they have to take appropriate measures with those people, which makes Lydia's face go pale. Seal tells her that if the public ever found out the truth, the whole kingdom would just be filled with constant fear. He describes a nightmare where your family or even your neighbors could just snap without warning and start attacking everyone around them. Those quiet nights and peaceful mornings everyone takes for granted could just disappear forever. And it's why they're working so hard, but Levis cuts in with a look of regret, explaining that one day while Seal was away, they screwed up and let Medusa's power get totally out of control. Mages are seen working in a dark lab, standing around giant tanks. Back at the lab, things take a turn for the worse when one of the mages notices the shackles on Medusa's head are failing. And before anyone can react, the whole place just explodes with energy. Glass is flying everywhere, and the mages can't do anything but try to cover their faces, while Medusa's head looks like it's finally woken up. She's got this terrifying grin on her face as her power starts pouring out of the tank. Seal doesn't waste any time and drops a black box cage spell right on top of the mess to try and trap the curse, but it's a struggle. Levis yells out Seal's name as he watches him put everything into the magic circle he's holding between his hands. Once the box is stable, Levis starts apologizing like crazy, saying it's their fault for being so careless while Seal was away. Seal just brushes it off, telling him it's fine and that he's the one who should take the blame for bringing something so dangerous back in the first place. But the damage is already done. Mages are dropping all over the room, groaning in pain because they all just got hit by the curse. Seal keeps his cool even though things are falling apart, and he barks out an order for everyone to get to the infirmary right now. But then Levis finishes the story by telling Lydia that Seal actually jumped in to take the worst of the curse himself, leaving Lydia looking completely horrified at what he did. Lydia is completely thrown off by the story and asks if the whole situation isn't a massive deal. Her face says it all as she clenches her fist, demanding to know if Seal was just lying to her the whole time to keep those state secrets hidden. Seal looks down, admitting she has a point, but explains he was just desperate to get her help, figuring that anyone would be terrified if they heard about death curses and government secrets right off the bat. He tells her he thought if she put all the blame on him, she'd be able to cook without holding back, but Lydia just looks at him and says she really hates being lied to. Seal bows his head and offers a sincere apology, admitting the lie was pretty stupid since he ended up showing her the dying mages anyway. Lydia looks over at the stacks of plates and admits that what she said wasn't entirely true. She does hate lies. But she realizes that if she had known the terrifying truth from the very start, she probably would have just run away and hidden. She decides she isn't angry anymore and suggests they take some of the food she prepped to the mages who can't get out of bed. So she shows off the finished dish with a smile, calling it a healthy daikon hamburger steak instead of an angry one. The mages in the infirmary start eating and finally get some strength back. The mages are losing it because they can actually taste food again, and one guy is even shocked that he's got the strength to stand up. It's like a total 180 from before. Lydia watches them, feeling pretty confused since she's always been told she doesn't have a lick of magic in her, yet here they are, getting better because of her. Seal turns to her with a soft smile and says her name, following it up with a real, heartfelt thank you. He looks her in the eye and admits he was terrified of losing the people he works with, the ones he considers completely irreplaceable. Lydia blushes hard and tells him he's welcome. But in the back of her mind, she's starting to wonder if there really is something special, something almost like a hidden, mysterious power tucked away inside her cooking that she never knew about. Suddenly, the entire St. Weiss squad starts cheering her name and shouting that they'll never forget this favor. They even pledge their eternal loyalty to her right on the spot. Lydia gets all flustered and tries to wave it off, telling them it's really not as deep as they're making it out to be. But the mages aren't listening and start hoisting her up into the air, calling her an angel and a miracle fairy for saving them with her food. She's screaming at them to put her down while Seal just watches with a grin. And in that moment, Lydia decides she really, truly hates men. The two of them start walking through the stone halls of the palace. Lydia looks completely drained, while Seal tries to be a gentleman, mentioning he knew she might be mad at him, but didn't think she'd refuse to even wear his coat. Lydia snaps back that she just straight up hates men now, thinking about how much the truth actually hurts. Seal looks pretty down as he admits he was only trying to act like Lucian to get her to cook for him, but he knows he's not nearly as good at the act as the real guy is. Lydia is totally blown away, yelling about how his weird attitude makes sense if it was just a bad impression. But before she can say more, a voice from down the hall calls out her name and asks why she's there. They both stop dead in their tracks. Standing right in front of them is the guy Lydia was hoping to avoid. She stares at him, realizing that deep down she knew this moment was coming eventually, especially since they're in the royal palace. Prince Stefan doesn't waste any time, yelling that he's officially breaking off their engagement, while Lydia just looks at the cheating scumbag with pure hate. Someone calls out the prince's name, but Lydia is stuck in her own head, screaming that her absolute arch-nemesis is finally standing right in front of her. She just glares at her ex-fiancé, thinking about how he's nothing but a low-life cheater who ruined everything. It's like her worst nightmare since she was so close to finally escaping this place. Now, she's just stuck there thinking about how her timing couldn't possibly be any worse. Stefan gets even more heated, yelling at Lydia and demanding to know why she's dressed in such a weird outfit. He looks between Lydia and the guy standing behind her, realizing that Seal is the one she's hanging out with. Seal tries to keep it professional, telling the prince there's a good reason for them being together, but Stefan just mocks him, and then he really goes off, accusing Lydia of hunting for guys the second they broke up and asking if she was fooling around with Seal in the palace. Lydia is just standing there with a blank look, wondering how his brain even came up with something so stupid, but she tries to get a word in anyway, starting to explain the actual situation before Seal steps forward and interrupts, telling the prince flat out that Lydia is actually the one who saved his entire squad. Stefan looks like he's seen a ghost. Staring at Seal and asking him what he just said, he starts yelling again, claiming there's no way Lydia would help them, mostly because she doesn't even have the power to do it. He turns his anger back on Seal, saying he's just as trashy for bringing his ex-fiancée into the palace just to get his hands on her. Stefan looks right at Seal and tells him it's a huge problem that people of his kind don't have any common sense. Lydia stands there in total shock, just repeating the name Jewel Person in her head as it finally clicks. She starts thinking about how Seal's eyes and hair always had this weird, beautiful glow to them, realizing he belongs to the Jelham, a rare race whose entire bodies are actually made of jewels, making her remember the stories about them being called monsters from the moon and how badly they were treated in the past. Lydia can't stay quiet anymore and snaps, asking the prince how he can say such horrible things when Seal and his mages were just in the infirmary, literally on the brink of death after risking everything for the country. She saw firsthand how exhausted even someone as strong as Seal was. Stefan just scoffs and yells that it's only natural for someone like him to work for the kingdom, and he adds that his father only made Seal the head mage, even though he knew Seal was just a half-breed Jewel Person. Lydia clenches her fist, feeling a wave of anger toward the prince for how he treated Seal despite everything he's done, as Stefan continues his rant, claiming Seal's brain is made of minerals and that's why he's a traitor. But Lydia finally snaps and yells that he's going way too far. She can't believe this man is actually supposed to be the future king after the way he just disgraced someone so important, making Stefan glare at her, asking who she thinks she is. He reminds her that she's just a commoner now and shouldn't even think about talking back. He gets even more delusional, asking if she's only hanging around Seal to make him jealous or to get back at him for the breakup. Stefan laughs it off as something foolish, just saying her name like he still has some kind of hold over her. But Lydia just stands there with her face turning red, looking like she's reached her absolute breaking point, until she finally explodes, shouting that it's none of his business who she spends her time with or what she does anymore. She puts all her frustration into one loud scream, telling him straight to his face that she hates him. The prince stands there completely frozen and speechless while she repeats that she absolutely hates him, finally letting it all out. Seal tries to get Lydia to chill out, but she's on a roll, wishing the prince gets so fat he can't fit into his clothes anymore. She doesn't stop there and adds that she hopes his belt snaps in the middle of a dance so his pants fall down in front of everyone. Lydia starts muttering about him being cursed with swirlies in her eyes, so Seal finally just reaches over and covers her mouth to stop the scene. He holds her back to keep her quiet while she struggles. Inside her head, Lydia is still fuming, thinking about how she's finally unleashing all that bottled-up anger. She's tired of just taking it out on cooking ingredients and is glad she's finally letting the prince have it. But then she starts feeling a bit down, wondering what they actually did to deserve someone like Stefan acting like this, leaving her stuck in a memory of her old life as a noble. Suddenly, someone starts shouting that things are going sideways because the round sheep from the Mage Bureau have broken loose. Seal just looks over and sighs like he really didn't need this right now. A massive swarm of sheep starts flying through the air like a stampede, making Lydia yell out in shock while the prince looks like he's about to lose it. People start screaming for the prince to run for cover as the fluffy chaos takes over the entire area. But Levis jumps into action, reaching out and telling everyone he's going to catch them all before things get any worse. Seal grabs Lydia and tells her they need to get moving right now, and she lets out a little yell as he hauls her away. Back in the chaos, Prince Stefan is getting absolutely swarmed by fluffy animals and yells out, wondering why there are even sheep in a place like this. Stefan tries to shout for Lydia to wait, but Seal is already gone, carrying her through the stampede while the sound of screaming echoes all across the castle grounds. Later on, Lydia is finally catching her breath, still looking a bit shaken as she wonders what that whole mess was about. She brings up the sheep stampede at the castle to Seal, worrying if Levis and the other knights are going to be okay after all that madness. But Seal just calmly explains that it was all just summoning magic, which catches Lydia completely off guard. He breaks it down, saying the spell creates physical forms that just vanish once they've done their job, making them half real and half fake. So he figures Levis and his subordinates must have been behind the whole thing. Lydia realizes that means they basically saved her and Seal from a bad situation, and she can't help but laugh, thinking it was actually pretty hilarious watching the prince get tossed around by a bunch of round sheep. Seal looks at the tea and tells Lydia that talking to the crown prince that way is actually pretty dangerous, because Lydia starts thinking about how the prince used to be way nicer back in the day. He seems so much more annoyed lately, but she quickly shuts that thought down. Seal apologizes, admitting it's totally his fault for dragging her to the palace when she didn't even want to go, and Lydia tries to say it's fine, but Seal just tells her to forget about all that for right now. He gets serious and confesses that he's basically done nothing but lie to her. He only came to her because he was desperate to save his men, and he calls himself out for making such pathetic excuses. Lydia looks away, telling him she's not even mad anymore and is just honestly happy that he and the other knights are doing well. She admits she really didn't want to run into the prince, but at the same time she's glad she finally got to give him a piece of her mind, so she grips her dress, saying it's a huge relief that a guy that awful isn't her fiancé anymore. Suddenly, a memory of a younger Stefan pops into her head. He's smiling and calling out her name, and she remembers being a kid, holding hands with him in a field of flowers and telling him how much fun she was having. The memory shows a young Stefan asking Lydia if she likes flowers while she wears a crown of them, and back in the present, Lydia looks down with tears in her eyes, feeling the sting of those old memories. Seal suddenly reaches out and takes her hands in his. He tells her how happy he was to be with her, and while kneeling before her, Seal explains that it meant everything to him when she got angry on his behalf while people were looking down on him. He gives her a really gentle smile, thanking her and telling her she's a truly kind person, which makes Lydia's face turn bright red. She says his name under her breath but immediately tells herself no. She realizes she's been acting just like Prince Stefan lately. She's been rejecting Seal and avoiding him just because he's a man, never even giving him a real chance. She really thought this was going to be the very last time they ever spoke to each other. But she starts to worry that if she keeps pushing away the people who actually care about her, she'll just end up completely alone. So she gathers her courage and asks Seal if he'd like to stay for dinner, making sure he knows it's only if he wants to. Seal beams with a huge smile, asking if she's really sure about the invitation. He's clearly hyped, saying her cooking is better than anything he's ever tasted. Lydia can't help but blush and smile back at him. She gets all fired up, promising to make him something that tastes amazing. She heads to the kitchen and gets to work. The sound of her knife hitting the board fills the room as she slices through an onion. While she's prepping, she actually starts talking to the food. She looks down at the onion in her hand and tells it that something terrible happened. She vents about her ex-fiancé, calling him a bottom-of-the-barrel cheater. But she tells the onion that it gets even worse. The guy was a total bigot too. She thinks about how words can cut people just as deep as a blade. Looking at all the fresh veggies in the basket, she even whispers an apology to them. Her mind goes back to when the prince called her a jewel person. It was such a weird, insulting thing to say that it honestly left her speechless. Seal catches on to the heavy mood and apologizes for making her feel uncomfortable earlier. Lydia just shakes it off, saying she's heard stuff like that for so long, she's pretty much just become desensitized to people being jerks. Seal watches her closely, his expression turning a bit more serious. Lydia stops what she's doing and looks right at him. She tells him straight up that she thinks he should be way angrier about the way people treat him. Lydia grips her whisk and bowl, looking a bit fired up. She tells him that she's staying exactly who she is, and she's not backing down. Seal looks down at the bowl and asks if it's really all right for him to be angry. Lydia doesn't hesitate, telling him he's done nothing wrong, so he has every right. She even jokes about the fact that he technically kidnapped her. But that doesn't change the fact that he earned his position fair and square. She keeps whisking away while saying it's totally wrong for people to say such nasty things to him. Seal is completely caught off guard. He just stares at her with wide eyes, barely able to whisper her name because the food is finally done. It's a perfect steaming plate of melt-in-your-mouth omelet rice paired with a simple vegetable soup. Lydia shows off the meal with a huge, proud smile. She calls it the ultimate comfort food for anyone who's had a really bad day, and as she looks at her work, she realizes the anger and sadness are just gone. She has no regrets left and wants the name of the dish to capture that. The scene shifts as they get ready to eat. Someone invites Lady Seal and Lord Theobald to join in. Thanking her for the food, Seal puts his hands together and gives her a sincere thank you for the wonderful meal, looking totally at peace. Seal finally takes a bite and lets out a muffled sound of pure satisfaction. He says the food is delicious and admits he feels a weird surge of energy through his body. He's actually shocked, asking if the meal is somehow restoring his magic. Lydia gets a bit flustered and tells Master Seal that she really just made a normal plate of omelet rice, but Seal just smiles and apologizes, saying he couldn't help himself from reacting that way. He adds that the taste is just so comforting, which makes Lydia beam with a huge smile as she agrees. After finishing the meal, Seal sets his spoon down and asks Lydia if she would be willing to listen to what he has to say. Lydia seems a bit surprised but agrees to hear him out. He warns her that it's not a very interesting story, but he wants to tell her about his upbringing. The scene shifts back in time to a large, cold stone building, and a younger Seal is shown leaning against a wall in pain, letting out a quiet groan as he struggles. Lydia says thank you very much, looking so happy to finally be chosen as Lord Stefan's bride, but Seal knows he has to be the one to protect her now. He remembers her yelling about how much she hated him, and it actually hurts. He groans in pain, clutching his face as the memories keep hitting him. Voices from the past ask why this is happening, while a shadow of his former self explains that Lydia was his fiancée once. Seal remembers swearing to protect her, promising he'd make her happy for the rest of her life. He even called her his lovely fiancée. Back then, Francois looked totally shocked and called out for Lord Stefan, who she was frantic about. She asked if he was okay, since she heard her sister had actually broken into the royal palace. Francois kept going on about how worried she was when she heard there was some big commotion, but then she got this creepy smile, thinking to herself about how pathetic and clingy her sister really is. Seal just stares off, completely stunned by everything he's remembering. Francois keeps thinking about how pathetic her sister is, comparing Lydia to a rat looking for scraps just for showing her face to the prince again. Stefan agrees with her, looking pretty dark while he remembers how wretched that other guy looked, just like a common rat. Back in the present, Seal takes Lydia's hands and is asking her if she'd be willing to listen to a story about his past. He tells her it isn't exactly an exciting tale, but he wants to explain a bit about his upbringing and how he grew up, explaining that since he was born and raised right in the royal capital, he never really knew much about the Gem people, except for the history lessons at the academy about their city, Edelstein, and the hard times they faced. Lydia gets curious and asks if he's actually from there. Seal explains that his mother, Bianca, was actually a noble from the House of Wisteria, the family that rules over the city of the Jewel people. He mentions that while his mother was out inspecting the city, she ended up meeting and falling for his father, Safiro, and Lydia thinks the whole thing sounds like a total romance novel, looking completely swept up in the story. But Seal's tone shifts, mentioning that his grandfather, the Count of the Frontier, wasn't about to let a relationship like that happen. Seal gets into the dark stuff, explaining how his grandfather dragged his mother home after she eloped, then took advantage of her as a sick way to punish her, and it turns out she was eventually sentenced to something called jewel piercing. Lydia's completely thrown off by the name, asking him what that even means. Seal explains that when you cut the gem people into tiny pieces, they just turn into dead jewels, and some people actually hunt them just for those stones, though the worst part is that this kind of stuff still hasn't totally stopped. Lydia looks like she's about to lose it, begging him to stop because it's all too much. He keeps going, saying his people have been hated forever because everyone thinks they're just like the monsters from the moon, so to the rest of the kingdom they're basically just animals. And since they're seen as beasts, people don't feel any guilt about killing them. Lydia starts breaking down in tears, saying how awful the whole thing is, and she just can't get over how cruel everyone has been to his family. Bianca holds young Seal in a rocking chair, telling him about how Safiro didn't want them holding grudges. She says nobody is at fault, and that holding on to hate just makes things worse for everyone. Seal looks up at his mother with a confused face. He just can't wrap his head around the idea that no one is actually to blame for their lives being so messed up. Bianca gives him this really sad, forced smile, but deep down, she's honestly wondering if the lie she's telling him is even true at all. She starts losing her cool, crying while she asks what she's supposed to do with all the sadness and pain she's been carrying around. And she snaps, saying she can't believe no one is at fault. She blames her father and the whole country for looking down on the Jewel people like they're just beasts. She keeps going, saying things would be different if it weren't for the curse, while Seal just watches her, completely worried, and calls out to her. Bianca catches herself and snaps back to reality, realizing she's scaring her kid with her outburst. She pulls him into a tight hug and tells him how sorry she is. She feels terrible for putting him through so much suffering. And as the room goes quiet, she tells him that the whole situation is actually all her fault. She says she's the one to blame because she fell in love with Safiro and decided to have a child, so in her mind, she's the only one responsible for the mess they're in. The memory of his mother's hand on his face lingers. She whispers how sorry she is for everything, and Seal explains that she didn't last long. The constant stress eventually killed her while he was still just a kid. Since she was gone, he was brought up as the Margrave family's biggest mistake, a total disgrace that they couldn't bring themselves to kill or throw out, simply because he still had noble blood in his veins. Lydia starts tearing up, telling him it's hard to hear him talk about such a rough past like it's nothing. It just makes her even sadder. She says it's like he's watching his own life and feelings from a distance, as if they don't even belong to him, and she asks if he's only like this because he's been forced to bottle everything up for so long. She wonders if having the blood of the Jewel people means he's stuck feeling this way forever. Seal gives her a small smile and admits he doesn't have many happy stories to tell her, but even so, he says he's not sure why, but he really wanted Lydia of all people to know his story. Lydia holds Seal's hand as a soft light glows between them, and she tells him she wants to hear everything. She really wants to know the rest of his story. Seal just stares at her, totally caught off guard. He thinks to himself that this is the first time anyone has ever actually wanted to know about him. Moving on, Seal explains that after he ditched the Wisteria family, he spent time as a mercenary. He says magic was the only thing he was ever good at, until the king himself asked him to join the St. Weiss mages. Lydia asks if he means the king, and Seal confirms it was Seal Bernard, Prince Stefan's father. He takes a sip of tea and explains that the king knew his whole deal. He knew he had Jewel person blood and that he had completely walked away from his family, but despite all that, the king still respected him and wanted to use his power for the kingdom's sake. Hearing all this makes Lydia feel terrible. She tells him he's gone through so much, and she feels bad for all the mean things she said to him before, so she starts crying and apologizes. Seal looks at her, trying to tell her that she's actually the one who's helped him, but Lydia is just totally overwhelmed. She tells him that if he hadn't shown up to eat with her today, she'd just be sitting alone in the dark, crying and hating Stefan again. But instead, she gives him a huge, tearful smile and thanks him for just being there to talk. Lydia gives Seal a warm look and thanks him for listening to her story too. The scene shifts outside where the shop sits quiet under the night sky. As they stand by the door, Seal calls out to Lydia to get her attention. He explains that if he can figure out the mystery of the moon's tears, the hate toward Jewel people will finally go away, and that's why he started his research. Seal tells her he wants to look into her power, even though he knows it's probably something she won't like, but he thinks that since she saved the St. Weiss mages, she might be able to do something about the curse on the moon too. He's convinced that the secret behind the lunar tears is connected to her, saying he's absolutely sure of it. Lydia just stares back at him, clearly surprised by how much faith he has in her, so she asks if she can really be that helpful, and Seal tells her of course she can. She asks if all she has to do is keep cooking, and he just says yeah. Lydia thinks about how her cooking might actually have power, and she wonders if she can finally be useful after feeling like a failure for so long. Lydia gets this super determined look and tells him she's definitely going to help, mostly because they're officially friends now, and she repeats the word friends like it's the most natural thing ever. Seal just stands there looking completely stunned, asking if she really wants to be his friend, so Lydia gives him a huge smile and says of course, since they shared a meal together, that basically makes them friends already. Seal looks down, still a little unsure, and asks if she's actually okay being friends with a guy like him, but then he lets out a soft smile and finally accepts it, calling her Lydia-san and agreeing that yeah, they really are friends. Lydia clasps her hands together and tells him that whenever things get rough, or if he's sad or can't find the words to be angry, she'll be the one to cry and get mad for him, because she's hoping that by standing by his side, she can help take away at least half of the pain he's been carrying. Seal reaches out and takes her hand, smiling as they say their goodbyes for now, but he makes sure to tell her they need to eat together again soon, and tells her thank you so much, he really means it. Just as he's about to head out and starts pulling his hood back up, he stops and realizes he forgot to mention something. Seal holds out a glowing, tear-shaped stone in his hand. Lydia looks at it and asks what it is, so Seal explains that gems from the gemfolk are packed with magic, and since he's half-blooded, he's got one too. Lydia hands it back and tells him he should keep it as a charm to protect his friend. Seal takes it and thanks her, and Lydia watches him go, thinking about how he's actually the very first friend she's ever made. As Seal walks away under the light of the twin moons, his mind starts drifting back to his childhood. He remembers being just a little kid, huddled on the floor under a blanket and feeling completely alone. His grandfather, Count Wistelia, used to scream at him, saying the family line was ruined because of the cursed gems in Seal's body, and that he only took in orphans to save the family name. The memory of being called the shame of the family hits hard back when he was always hungry, covered in dirt, and the other kids in the house would laugh at him, calling him a monster and telling him he wasn't allowed to leave his room. The saddest part was seeing his mother, Bianca, wasting away in bed. She just looked at him with a weak smile and told him she was sorry. Bianca's last wish is for her son to live his life freely, she cries while saying it, and Seal remembers how much it hurt to lose her and be all alone. But eventually, those feelings started fading away. Young Seal creeps out of his room, looking dirty and completely worn out. He wanders around the big estate, just trying to find something to eat. He ends up at a trash bin behind the house and starts digging through it. He finds a scrap of bread, looking at it like it's the most important thing in the world. Suddenly, two noble kids show up and catch him. One of them asks what he's holding there. The kid yells to his friend Vershark that Seal is eating moldy bread. He asks if he was really digging through the trash. Vershark grabs the bread right out of Seal's hand and asks Clifford if monsters even eat bread. And Clifford jokes that since Seal's body is basically made of stone, he probably has a different diet in mind. The piece of bread just sits there in the dirt, and one of the bullies yells that Seal can eat the dirt too. Seal stares down at the ground with this totally empty look in his eyes like he's barely even there. He reaches down and grabs the bread anyway, not even caring that it's filthy. He takes a massive bite, and you can practically hear the dirt crunching between his teeth as he starts shoving the rest in his mouth. Clifford and Vershark are totally grossed out, yelling about how he actually ate the dirty bread. The two noble kids start heading off, leaving Seal hunched over on the ground while they call him a disgusting brat. They tell him the Margrave wants him to hurry up and die, then order him back to the attic and tell him to never show his face again. They walk away laughing and holding hands, leaving Seal standing there all by himself in the dark. Suddenly, a small noise from the bushes catches his ear, making him look up from his meal. A tiny kitten crawls out of the grass right in front of him, just another lonely soul wandering around. Seal looks down as the little kitten starts rubbing against his leg, purring like crazy, and the kid just stares at it, looking totally caught off guard by the sudden company. He holds out a piece of his dirty bread and asks the kitten if it wants some too. The kitten doesn't even hesitate and starts munching on the scraps, which honestly surprises him. He thinks it's a total weirdo for eating right out of his hand, especially since he's a gem kid, but with tears in his eyes and a tiny smile, he asks the cat if they can just eat together. The two of them sit there under the trees sharing the bread, finally finding a bit of comfort. The memory fades as two plates of perfectly cooked food sit on a table looking amazing. In the present, Seal and Lydia are sitting across from each other. Finally having a quiet meal, Seal looks at her with this peaceful expression and softly says Lydia's name. The sun is out over the cozy little house where Lydia stays, and someone inside yells out a quick thank you. A wooden sign hangs on the door showing the shop is closed for the day. Inside, a hot bowl of rice topped with 2 perfect fried eggs and some sausages sits steaming on the table. Lydia presents the meal with a big smile, telling everyone that breakfast is served, a total classic with a side of milk tea to keep things chill. A guy with an eye patch and his hair pulled back is sitting there. Turns out he's an associate of the merchant from the land of Wa. Tsukuyomi looks at the spread and gets all excited, but then she apologizes for bugging Lydia since it's actually her day off. Lydia just smiles and says it's really no trouble at all. She considers her landlord and her suppliers special, so she wants to make sure they're fed well. It turns out Tsukuyomi traveled from across the sea to sell rare spices and tea. Meanwhile, her partner just digs into the food. People say Tsukuyomi is basically a mage who can even talk to whales, but right now, everyone's just focused on how good that runny egg yolk tastes with the sausage. Tsukuyomi sips her tea and points out that Lydia seems to be in a great mood today, even mentioning how much that bright apron suits her. Lydia stands there in her maid outfit looking totally stunned. She looks down at the fabric of her new apron, blushing and saying that this is. Seal explains that since he ruined her old one, he got her this new one as an apology gift. He goes back to mixing ingredients with a smile while Lydia just stands there processing it all. Tsukuyomi claps her hands together and says, "Oh my." Looking pretty hyped, Lydia asks if that's Margaret-san, as Tsukuyomi cheers her on and tells her she's doing a great job. Someone holds up their bowl and mentions that even with everything going on, Tsukuyomi and her partner start laughing, saying she wished she'd seen the crown prince get run over by a bunch of round sheep because he totally deserved it. Seal tells them to relax since they could get arrested for talking trash about the royals if the wrong person hears. leaving Lydia smirking as she admits seeing him get flattened made her feel way better. But then she changes the subject. Tsukuyomi asks what the demon lord of the profound is doing here, while Lydia just stands there, repeating the name in confusion until Tsukuyomi explains that he's actually the famous abyssal demon lord Seal Vermilion. Lydia is completely losing it as the merchant tells her that even someone from another land knows who he is. So the image of Seal as a high-level mage flashes through her mind as she finally connects the dots. Lydia gets all hyped up and yells that she thought he was just a regular guy, but Seal waves his hands and begs her to stop, saying that edgy title is way too embarrassing for his age. Tsukuyomi jokes about it and mentions how Lucien actually loves his own nickname, the Starfall Reaper, which makes Lydia look totally drained as she wonders if that just means he's some kind of battle-hardened womanizer. She decides to just drop the subject and asks the two of them what they're making for the meal, only for them to reveal a big tray of frozen, pre-made hamburger steaks ready to go. Lydia holds up a tray of frozen meals, explaining that since Seal is moving out of the dorms to live alone, she's packing his food with extra beans and veggies to make sure he stays healthy. Seal gives her a warm smile and thanks her for being so thoughtful, then tells her not to worry about him too much because he usually just eats solid food whenever he feels like he's missing some nutrition, which just makes Lydia even more stressed out. The conversation shifts as Lucien stares off, wondering why monsters keep falling from the moon in the first place. Lydia asks if they don't have the lunar tears back in his home country of Wakuni, and Lucien takes a sip of his drink, explaining they only have one normal white moon over there. He thinks it's pretty weird how two places under the same sky can see such different things, so Lydia asks if there's actually no way to stop the tears from happening. She explains that the kingdom tells everyone that praying to goddess Alexandria is the only way to end it, leading to people making pilgrimages to temples everywhere. But Lucien thinks the whole thing sounds like a scam. Lydia gets defensive and says it's not shady at all, mentioning how her sister Francois has the goddess's blessing and can heal any curse or injury. Lucien goes quiet for a second, looking a lot more serious as he repeats the fact that it's her little sister they're talking about. He points out that something feels off, because if her sister really had that kind of power, there wouldn't be any sick people left in the capital, but that obviously isn't what's happening. Lydia keeps explaining that the reason her sister doesn't help everyone is because of their father's policy. He believes the goddess's power shouldn't be wasted on small stuff, so Francois isn't allowed to just use her magic whenever she wants. But Lucien isn't buying it. He tells Lydia she's talking big for someone who can't even use magic herself. Lydia snaps back that it's the truth, remembering a time when her sister actually brought a small bird back to life. It had eaten rat poison and was basically dead in someone's hands until Francois stepped in and healed it, letting the bird fly away while everyone watched in total disbelief. The crowd went wild, calling it a miracle and praising Francois as a saint for saving the little thing. So young Lydia could only watch from behind a wall. She looked pretty lonely while her sister got all the attention. Just then, Francois spotted her in the shadows and called out to her sister, asking with a huge smile on her face what she was doing hanging out in such a dark place all by herself. Francois suddenly grabs Lydia by the hand and tells her to follow along. The sudden pull catches Lydia off guard, making her stumble as Francois asks right to her face if it's true she doesn't have a lick of magic. She stays smiling while Lydia just looks totally crushed, especially with everyone in the crowd whispering about her. They're all calling her the useless, magicless daughter of the family. As the people around them keep hyping up the miracle they just saw, Lydia can only stand there and take it. She's clearly hurting. But then Francois twists the knife by telling her a miracle like that would be impossible for someone like her. Back in the present, Lydia gets a bit annoyed thinking about it. She knows healing magic has real limits, like how it can't cure diseases or break every curse, and Seal backs her up. He explains that once poison hits a lethal dose, even the best magic can't fix it, so if Francois actually brought a bird back from the dead, it would be a crazy miracle, but Seal seems to have his doubts about the story. Lucien points out the whole situation is starting to smell pretty fishy. Seal agrees the plot is definitely thickening and turns his attention back to Lydia, who looks like she just saw a ghost. She tries to say something to Seal, but the words are barely coming out. Lydia suddenly shouts about a kitty. Seal just stands there looking completely lost by the sudden energy shift, making him stare at the food she's holding. Lydia asks if it actually looks like a cat, and the answer is a big yes. It's sparkling, and it seems like the missing piece of the puzzle. Lydia yells out to everyone that she finally figured out what her diner was lacking. She's totally fired up and declares how cute it is. She's looking way more motivated than before, and then she starts opening up about her past. She admits she used to cook with so much hate that her food literally looked like demons and pools of blood, which makes Lucien look pretty worried. He's got some serious concerns, but Levis thinks the idea of demon food is just funny and tells her to go for it. Lydia ignores the weirdness and says cats are way better than demons anyway. She decides right then that her new cute hamburger steak is exactly what she needs, so Lucien starts crying happy tears. He's just relieved she's choosing cats over holding grudges. Levis isn't as emotional and just asks if she can make octopuses too, since he likes them better than cats. Lydia says that's easy, she can just cut the sausages to look like little octopuses or crabs to make the plate look perfect. Soon enough, the kids in the diner are staring at their plates in total shock. The new cat-themed meal looks incredible and finally feels right. Lydia is totally vibing with her new idea, thinking about how her food is finally both adorable and delicious. She's holding her mixing bowl and promises to whip up a bunch of kitty burgers, telling Seal that eating them makes any loneliness disappear. She leans in close with a huge blushing smile and asks Seal if he's actually into cats, and he just stands there for a second looking completely stunned by how close she is. But then he softens up and tells her she's right, because she's always by his side lately, he doesn't feel lonely at all. Lydia's face turns bright red, and she tells him he's being way too embarrassing. But the romantic moment gets completely ruined when the door slams open. Lucien is standing there looking like he just walked into something he wasn't supposed to see. He yells at Seal, demanding to know what the heck he's doing hanging out there. But Tsukuyomi just sighs and tells Lucien he totally killed the mood right when things were getting interesting. Margaret agrees and says watching them was so heartwarming it felt like her soul was getting cleaned, while the two of them just stand there. Lucien stomps into the room looking pretty annoyed and immediately demands to know why Seal is even there. The argument heats up fast with Lucien pointing a finger and yelling about them cooking together, but Seal just stays cool and says they're just friends hanging out. Lucien looks completely wiped out and wonders what even happened while he was gone, though Lydia doesn't give him a break and scolds him for being dramatic as soon as he got back. She softens up though, giving him a warm welcome home and asking if he's hungry after his long expedition, which makes Lucien's face turn bright red as he looks away and mumbles that he'll eat whatever she wants to make. Lydia gets a bit annoyed and tells him that anything is actually the toughest request for a cook to handle, but then Lucien reaches out and grabs her, getting all serious while he admits he missed her cooking the whole time he was away. He looks her right in the eyes and says that the specific dish doesn't actually matter at all, because he just really wants to eat a meal that she made herself, which leaves Lydia standing there completely flushed and wide-eyed. She can't handle the tension and yells that he's totally hopeless, before turning around and rushing away to hide her face. Lydia mentions she still has those special grudge sausages she made just for Lucien and asks if he wants to eat some before heading out. Lucien looks pretty nervous about the name, but says he'll eat them anyway. Things get tense when Lucien snaps at Seal, trying to brag about the fact that he's known Lydia for way longer than him. But Seal just shuts him down by saying trust isn't about how much time people spend together. The two guys just stand there staring each other down like a tiger and a dragon ready to scrap. Lydia steps in to stop the fight and tells Lucien to just relax, even offering to cut his sausages into cute shapes like little crabs and octopuses. She looks him in the eye and asks if he's actually going to eat or not. Lucien gets all flustered and blushes, shouting that he'll definitely eat it, so Lydia gives him a huge smile and promises to make a ton of food for him. Finally, the drama dies down and they all hang out in the kitchen while Lucien enjoys his meal. Margaret watches the group and smiles, thinking it's nice to be young again, while Lucien just nods and agrees with her about the youthful energy in the room. Everything is peaceful outside the shop as the morning sun hits the building. Moving on to the kitchen, a huge ball of dough is sitting out on the counter, just waiting for Lydia to give it a poke to see if the texture is right, and she gets a kick out of it, giggling that it looks just like a bunny's butt because of how soft and fluffy it turned out. Lydia decides it's the perfect time to bake some bread, and she starts planning to throw in some walnuts and dried cranberries for extra flavor. A little later, she pulls a hot tray out of the oven filled with bread shaped like little flowers, and as the steam rises she checks them over, satisfied that they look totally delicious and ready to serve. Outside the window, a couple of birds hang out on the ledge, while back inside the rest of the food is already on the stove, simmering away in a pot to finish off the meal. Lydia steps out and stretches with a long yawn. She's barely awake when a little kitten shows up at her feet, and she gives it a sweet good morning while it meows right back at her. She can't help but smile, looking totally relaxed and happy to start her day. It seems like a peaceful morning in a warm shop surrounded by cute things, and Lydia thinks to herself that this is exactly the kind of vibe she's been looking for. But the peace doesn't last long. She ends up standing there completely stressed out because the place is packed. Levis and a new guy named Nocto greet her, mentioning that Captain Lucien overslept but will be there soon. Lydia just gives them a blank stare and a weak greeting, feeling exhausted before the day even really starts. Levis apologizes for them being so loud and rowdy first thing in the morning, though he explains that the mages actually started a fan club for her, and they're way more dedicated than the knights. The mages from St. Weiss are making a huge scene, complaining that they should have had priority at the dining hall this morning. They start talking trash about the knights, saying they've got some nerve barging in and causing trouble for Lydia, but Nocto isn't having it and yells back at Levis. He claims Lydia is the prize of the whole knighthood and reminds everyone that they were the ones who found her first. So the rest of the knights start cheering and get all fired up. They decide right then and there to start their own Lydia support club to keep up with the mages, making Lydia feel completely overwhelmed. She realizes that ever since that mess at the castle, the St. Weiss guys have been hanging out at the shop way too much, making her home feel cramped and way too manly. She tries to keep the peace, begging everyone to stop the stupid bickering. She tells them there's plenty of food for everyone, so they just need to relax and eat, but then Lucien finally walks in with a big smile on his face. He gives Lydia a casual good morning and comments on how nice the weather is outside, while Levis looks over at the crowded tables and asks if the St. Weiss crew is back again today. Lydia doesn't even give Lucien a chance, telling him straight up that there's no food left for him. He stands there totally shocked, asking her why she'd even say that, while in the back someone is still hard at work stirring a big steaming pot in the kitchen, until Lydia finally brings out the spread. She announces it's ready, serving up a heavy meal of soup and eggs with a side of cranberry walnut bread. Lydia happily presents the morning menu, showing off her cranberry walnut bread, a warm soup, and a special batch of fluffy scrambled eggs she made while she was busy, but Lucien looks a little suspicious of the names, asking if it's really not some kind of grudge bread or hell eggs. Lydia just laughs it off, admitting that her old self might have gone that route. She tells him she's feeling way better lately and has decided to finally show off her cute side instead. She promises that today's meal doesn't have a single drop of bitterness or a grudge in it, so he doesn't have to worry about anything bad happening, though Lucien still gives her a skeptical look, clearly wondering if he can actually trust her word on that. Meanwhile, Levis is absolutely loving the food, praising how well the creamy eggs and smooth tomato sauce go together. He says it's exactly the kind of quality he expects from Lydia, while she turns back to Lucien, annoyed that he's always bringing up stuff about curses and hatred. Lucien looks her in the eye and tells her she'd probably feel a lot better if she just let herself get actually angry about everything, which just makes Lydia flustered. She tells him to stop trying to flirt with her, but he just smiles and acts like he has no idea what she's talking about. Finally, Levis finishes his meal and thanks her, declaring that the entire St. Weiss Guild is on her side and would take on 1,000,000 soldiers just to protect her. Levis tells Lydia that the meal was great again today, while Lucien chimes in that the knights would take on 10,000,000 soldiers just for her. As the whole group of knights starts shouting about how they're basically a society dedicated to worshipping and supporting her no matter what. Lydia tries to stay grounded, telling them she has no plans to start a rebellion against the country, but Lucien puts a hand on her shoulder and tells her she's missing the point. He warns her that anyone in the kingdom could become an enemy at any moment, so she needs to be ready for a crisis, which makes Lydia spiral, asking how that's even possible for a simple cook at a local diner. Lucien just leans in and tells her it's better to always expect the worst-case scenario, but he follows it up with a promise that if it ever comes to that, he'll be the one to protect her. He holds her close and tells her that even if the entire world turns against her, he'll stay on her side. Lydia gets completely flustered, asking what kind of weird situation he's trying to make this into, while Lucien just laughs at how red her face is getting. But the moment is cut short when Shannon bursts through the door, looking totally panicked and begging Lydia for help. Lydia and Lucien both look up in surprise as she calls out the girl's name, wondering what's wrong, and Lucien notices she's carrying a strange little animal that looks kind of like a rabbit. Shannon holds it out, desperately asking Lydia to save the poor thing. Lucien takes a closer look and admits he's never seen a creature like that before, so he asks Shannon where she actually found it. Shannon explains she found the creature in the forest within the Holy City, but Lucien isn't so sure about that, since the city has a massive barrier that's supposed to keep all monsters out, making this whole thing pretty weird. Shannon doesn't care about the logistics and just begs Lydia to save the animal before it dies right in her arms. Lydia looks totally unsure and tells the girl she's not a vet, even though she really wants to help. She just stands there feeling completely stuck because she doesn't actually have any medical training. Shannon gets desperate and shouts that Lydia needs to just do something already since she's supposed to have some kind of mysterious powers. The whole group of knights stands there watching the scene as Shannon holds the dying creature out, but Lucien speaks up, telling Shannon that she's putting a huge burden on Lydia by entrusting this life to her. He looks her in the eye and asks if she even understands what it means to force that kind of responsibility on someone. Shannon just snaps back that she knows exactly how death works, and that's the whole reason she's asking Lydia to step in. Shannon gets desperate and begs Lydia for help, bringing up how she saved the mages before, but Lucien cuts in with a serious look, asking Shannon if there isn't something she needs to come clean about first. He calls Shannon out for having the nerve to ask for favors after lying to everyone, leaving Lydia completely stunned as Shannon finally breaks down and offers a genuine apology to her. Everything starts coming out now, the truth about how it was all just one big lie. Shannon explains that the good kid Lydia knows isn't real at all, and that the truth is a lot messier, involving constant street fights and stealing food just to survive the hunger. The biggest shock comes when Shannon reveals they're actually a boy from an orphanage who lied about everything, including having a family, which leaves Lydia standing there totally speechless. After a second, Lydia just sighs and says they really didn't have to keep all those secrets from her. Shannon looks down, admitting they were terrified that if Lydia knew they'd run away from the orphanage, she'd kick them out, and tells her how being by her side was the only time they ever actually felt safe. It turns out Lydia was the first person to ever just help them without wanting anything back. And then, the scene shifts back to the past at a small church where a voice starts calling out for Shannon. A nun walks through the courtyard looking around and asking where the kid went, while Shannon just hides behind a wall in total silence, trying to stay out of sight. Later on the street, a shopkeeper catches Shannon stealing an apple and starts screaming at the little brat, so Shannon takes off and runs right into Lydia, who's just sweeping up leaves and thinking about making some roasted sweet potatoes. Shannon grabs onto her and begs for help, calling her big sister out of nowhere, which leaves Lydia completely lost while the angry shopkeeper catches up and demands that they both stop right there. The shopkeeper grabs Shannon by the head and yells that there's no way they're getting away. He's calling them out as an apple thief. While Shannon struggles in pain, Lydia sees the whole thing go down, and she's completely stunned by how aggressive the guy is. She jumps in and tells him to stop right now, yelling that he shouldn't be doing such horrible things to a girl. Lydia stands her ground and says the kid was probably just too hungry to help themselves. She offers to pay for the apple if he'll just stop being so angry. Shannon looks up at her with wide eyes, surprised that a stranger would stick up for them. The guy decides to let it go as long as he gets his money, but he gives Shannon a final warning to never steal again. Once the shopkeeper is gone, Lydia gently places a hand on Shannon's head while she bows politely to finish things off. The shopkeeper waves them away, leaving Shannon just staring at the woman who saved them. Back in the present, a huge pan of hot steaming seafood is served up on the table, and Shannon looks at Lydia with a huge smile, telling her she needs to eat until she's completely full. Lydia smiles while serving some fresh bread and says that being hungry just makes a person feel really sad. She tells Shannon that's exactly why she opened the cafeteria, so kids like her would never have to struggle for food. The mood shifts to a dark memory under the stars, where a voice tells a child to be happy. Calling them a useless piece of trash, young Seal stands there with ropes tied around his body. While a man says his pretty face helped him sell for a high price, the guy holding the bag of coins just smirks like he's proud of himself for the deal. Seal tries calling out to his father, but the man just tells him to move it and starts dragging him away by the neck. His mom suddenly shows up looking completely horrified. Yelling at the man to ask what he's thinking, she grabs onto him and begs him to stop right now. But the guy just looks annoyed. He tells her to shut up, saying they can always just make another kid to replace him, leaving young Seal crying out for his mom as he's taken away. The scene flashes back to a man slumped over and bleeding out while a woman stands over him. She looks completely gone, saying she'll kill anyone who lays a finger on Shaku. A guy nearby freaks out and runs away, screaming that she's a murderer while Shannon just watches. The girl looks totally lost and barely manages to whisper for her mom. The woman reaches out with a bloody hand and calls Shannon's name, but she just smiles through the blood and tells the girl to run away and find happiness. The memory fades back to the present, where a fresh, hot meal sits on the table. Shannon stands there in silence as the weight of the past hits her. She can't hold it back anymore, and her tears start dripping right into the soup bowl. Lydia gently pats her head and asks if she's crying because she's so hungry, telling her it's all okay. Shannon finally starts eating, crying as she tells Lydia that things are okay now, while Lucien looks at Lydia and promises he's told the truth and won't lie again. Lydia holds Shannon close, realizing how much the kid has suffered lately. But then Shannon holds up a tiny, sick animal, saying it's dying alone just like she was before. Lydia just stares at her, totally moved by how much Shannon wants to help. Lydia pets the little creature, thinking it would be pretty pathetic to make Shannon cry, so she decides right then that if the girl wants to save this animal, she's in. Shannon has put all her trust in Lydia, and that really means something to her, so she gets fired up, shouting that she's going to cook something for both of them. She puts her game face on and declares once more that she's going to try cooking. Shannon looks pretty emotional. She's doing all of this for the little animal and for herself too. Lydia thinks about how if her cooking really has some kind of weird power, she wants to use it to help. Lucien steps in and says he's sure everything will turn out fine, but he's gonna keep a close watch just in case. He explains that in the rare case that the animal is actually a monster, Her food might make it go on a rampage. Lydia just stares at him, while Shannon huffs and hugs the little creature tighter, clearly not liking that idea. But then Levis chimes in with a smile, telling Lydia he's positive she's going to be just fine. He reminds her that he and Lord Seal might not even be alive right now if she hadn't stepped up back then. She starts getting to work, pouring a rich sauce over the dish she's putting together for them. Levis tells her that her power is basically miracle tier, which gets Lydia fired up enough to promise she'll do her best. It's time to just go for it. She decides right then to actually start believing in what she can do. Lydia grabs a whole basket of potatoes and tells herself it's time to get started. She begins by carefully slicing each potato into thin, even rounds on the board. She explains the process as she goes. The goal is to slice them thin, and then saute them in butter, adding that they need to simmer in salted water after that to get the texture just right. Lydia takes a quick taste and figures that while bouillon would make it better, the natural flavor is probably best since it's not for a human. She looks over at the little creature sleeping in its basket, wishing she knew what it actually was, as Nocto comments that it just looks like a regular rabbit to him, while Levis questions if it might be a monster. Lucien thinks it looks like a monster cub, but Shannon gets fired up and tells Lydia she can eat anything, even if it's a monster. Lydia asks Lucien if there's actually a difference between kid and adult monsters, but he tells her there isn't a chance. He explains that monsters from the Red Moon are born fully formed, and he's never once seen anything like a monster child. Levis points out that if monsters are actually having kids, it means they can reproduce, which would be a massive deal for monster ecology. But Lydia isn't having any of it. She gets protective and tells them straight up that she isn't handing Merle over, while someone questions the name, and Lydia just shrugs it off. She admits she didn't really know what else to call the little thing, so she settled on Merle. She looks down at the creature sleeping in the basket and tells Shannon how cute it is, then gets back to work in the kitchen. She mashes the boiled potatoes down until they're completely smooth before pouring in a bit of the cooking liquid and some round sheep milk to get the right consistency. She keeps stirring the pot slowly, making sure the heat stays low so the whole thing doesn't come to a boil, and finally it's done. Lydia smiles, proud of the lightly seasoned potato potage she whipped up just for the animals. Seeing Shannon open up gave Lydia a lot to think about. She wants to be someone who can live up to that kind of courage, so she takes a quiet second to herself. She asks the goddess to lend her strength for whatever comes next. Merle is still looking pretty rough, just lying there in the basket with no energy at all. Lydia holds her hands together, looking really worried. She begs Merle to please just eat something, even if it's only one bite. Shannon gets all fired up and cheers for the little guy. She yells that Lydia's cooking has the power to heal him, and they just need him to try it. The little creature leans over the bowl to catch the scent. After sniffing for a second, Merle finally sticks out a tongue and takes a tiny lick of the soup. Right away, Merle's eyes go wide and start sparkling. The taste is clearly a total shock. Lydia can't believe it and yells out that he's actually eating. She and Shannon both have huge smiles watching him go for it. In no time at all, the bowl is completely empty. Merle sits up looking way better and lets out a happy little chirp, making everyone in the room stop and stare. Seal, Levis, and the others are just blown away by how fast that worked, so Merle decides to show off a bit. He sits up tall and starts puffing out his chest with a lot of pride, which leaves Nocto, Seal, and Levis completely confused. They just stare at the little creature and the weird sounds it's making. Lydia is totally wiped out and drops to her knees on the floor. She's just so relieved that Merle is finally doing better, while Shannon runs into the room calling her name. Shannon doesn't waste a second and pulls Lydia into a huge hug, thanking her over and over for saving the little guy's life. Lydia pulls back and tells Shannon she's just glad the truth is finally out. Shannon looks down and asks if Lydia hates her now that she knows the real story. Lydia tells her she shouldn't even think that. She explains that whether Shannon is a girl or a boy, Shannon is still the same person to her, but there are still some things they need to fix. Lydia gives her a stern look and says running away from the orphanage and stealing food was wrong. Shannon feels bad and promises she'll never do it again. Seeing how sincere the kid is being, Lydia just gives her the biggest, brightest smile. Over by the door, the knights are watching the whole thing go down. One of them says he's happy everything's better, while the other can't help but talk about how amazing Lydia is. Seal looks over at Merle, thinking about how this was all a pretty big surprise. He admits he really thought the little creature was just some monster cub, but he can tell now that it doesn't have any bad intentions at all. He tells Lydia he's not surprised she could handle it, since she's clearly got some kind of miracle power, something Seal admits he's actually been aware of for a pretty long time. Seal looks straight at Lydia and drops a massive bombshell, telling her she actually has the power of a saint and the gift of healing. Lydia stands there in total shock, wondering if that's really all there is to the mystery behind her powers. She thinks back to her old life, feeling like even with these powers, nothing really changes since the High Priest's family already has Francois acting as their saint, and she can still see Francois's smug face perfectly, hearing her sister's voice calling her a useless big sister like it was yesterday. The memory alone is enough to make Lydia's blood boil, leaving her standing there with a totally annoyed look on her face. Moving on, Shannon looks up at Lucien and asks him exactly when he figured out she was lying to everyone. Lucien admits he knew from the very start, which makes Shannon lose it. She yells at him for being mean and keeping it to himself, but Lucien just gives a little smirk, explaining he actually thought she was a spy sent by the Resto family to keep an eye on Lydia. He says it would have been a disaster if anything happened to his Lydia, which immediately gets Shannon fired up as she asks him who he thinks he's talking about. Lucien just shuts her down by saying he checked into her orphanage and heard she was quite the little brat, leaving Shannon pouting in silence. Lydia looks Shannon in the eyes and asks if she's doing all right at the orphanage, but the kid just smiles and says everyone there is actually really nice, though she can't help but feel like she doesn't really belong. Lydia wags a finger and tells Shannon she shouldn't cause trouble for people who are being kind, especially since they're probably worried sick about her, so Shannon promises to ask for permission before visiting again, which gets her a nice bit of praise. Suddenly, Merle lets out a little chirp from Lydia's shoulder and startles Shannon right as Lydia realizes the kid can't take a pet back to the orphanage, leaving Shannon looking pretty down. That's when Levis steps up and yells that the St. Weiss squad will look after the animal, but Merle just starts hissing at him like crazy, making Levis realize the little thing absolutely hates him. Moving on, Lydia asks if she can just keep Merle herself, promising to tell Seal if anything weird happens, and Levis agrees since the creature seems harmless, though he still wants Seal to give it a look later. Shannon looks up and asks if Lydia will really take care of Merle for her, saying she'd be so happy if that happened. And as they stand by the window, the kid looks Lydia in the eye and promises that she's going to do her absolute best, confessing that she's always just leaned on Lydia for everything. But she finally realized that's not good enough anymore, because more than anything she wants to grow up fast. She tells Lydia that her goal is to become a cool adult, someone that Lydia can actually depend on for once, which leaves Lydia smiling and feeling totally touched by the sentiment. Nocto overhears and tells Shannon she should just join the Knights then, since she could slay monsters with plenty of style. But then Levis jumps in too, saying the Mages Division would be more than happy to welcome her into their ranks as well. Shannon shuts them both down though, yelling that they need to focus on first things first, and that involves her going back to the orphanage to live a decent life, which just makes Lydia giggle while the kid blushes. Outside, the soldiers watching through the window are moved to tears, calling Lydia a saint and swearing their eternal loyalty to her. The knights outside are getting way too hyped, with one guy shouting that Commander Lucien was the first to see how great Lydia is, which leads to them claiming she's basically the commander's wife and that their squad should be her personal guards. This doesn't sit well with the mages, who start calling the knights a bunch of muscle-brained idiots while sparks of magic fly, and the knights just fire back, telling those indoor shut-ins to stay out of their business. The door finally creaks open, and Lydia peeps her head out, looking at the massive crowd of fighting soldiers while asking them all to just listen for a second. She tells the guys they're bothering all the neighbors and need to shut it, and then some of the higher-ups chime in asking the group if they don't have actual jobs to be doing right now. Lydia just sighs to herself, feeling like a quiet, normal life is never going to happen, but Shannon tries to keep her spirits up by telling her not to let the chaos get her down. Watching them from the side, Lucien gets all caught up in his head, thinking about how he's actually jealous of Shannon while Nocto tries to figure out why his captain is spacing out. Lucien realizes that even if Shannon stops acting like a regular kid at the shop, she still gets to be the one who stays close to Lydia, and it hits him that he's just totally different from her, making him feel like there's a wall between them. He looks off into the distance with a pretty heavy expression, thinking about how he originally thought Shannon was just like the person he used to be. Lucien stares off, thinking about how he was able to see right through Shannon's act from the start, realizing it's because orphans have a very specific vibe that he knows all too well. He looks back at his old home, the Herluck Orphanage, where everything began, and recalls a nun asking him if he was there to check up on Shannon once again. She holds her hands together, thanking him for being the one to look out for the kid. The nun mentions how sad it is that Shannon feels the need to lie about who she is, but Lucien knows it's just a trust issue with adults, since there's really no such thing as a happy orphan with an easy past. A memory of a younger voice agreeing with that harsh reality plays in his head, showing a younger, scruffier Lucien wandering the town streets in a hooded cloak. He just laughs to himself, holding a stolen apple like it's his biggest win of the day. Lucien stands there thinking about how he just wants Shannon to finally see how much the people at the orphanage actually care about her. The nun bows and tells him they're sorry their own efforts weren't enough to keep the kid out of trouble, but Lucian just waves it off. He gets this really serious look in his eyes, thinking that if any of this mess ends up hurting Lydia, he's never going to forgive the people responsible. Later on, the whole group is hanging out together, with Nocto and the other knights enjoying a rare moment of peace in the woods. Lucian and Lydia stand side by side, both looking pretty relaxed and happy for once. Until Lucian mentions he never heard anything about Shannon stealing an apple before. Lydia completely freezes up, starting to panic as she tries to come up with a reason for what Lucian saw. She starts rambling about how the kid was just hungry and broke back then, making it sound like she had no other choice but to take it. Lydia practically begs him to let it go since Shannon was just a kid, even blurting out that she already went and paid for the apple herself. Lydia looks like she's about to lose it. She's got tears in her eyes and asks Lucian if he's actually going to arrest the kid, while she keeps pleading with him, hands held together like she's praying, but Lucian just stares her down without saying a word. He stays quiet for a long second, just watching how worked up Lydia is getting over this whole situation. Lucian finally speaks up, mentioning that the usual punishment for theft in the Holy City is 50 lashes, which makes Shannon start shaking as everyone looks down at the single apple that started this whole mess. But then Lucian's face softens, and he says it was just a kid's mistake, so they should probably just let it go. He looks right at Shannon and tells her he isn't going to arrest someone over one apple, and his serious vibe finally fades. Even as he reminds her it wasn't a good move, he just asks Shannon to promise she won't do it again. Shannon looks up and promises it won't happen again, telling Lucian she's sorry for what she did, so Lydia tells the kid how lucky they are that Lucian is so kind, which makes him get all flustered and claim that acting cute won't work on him. Lydia gives a warm, blushing smile while Lucian just watches her with his usual serious face. But then a memory flashes back to when Seal was just a kid, starving and trying to take a bite out of an apple. But as soon as he tastes it, he realizes something is way off and looks totally grossed out. He drops the fruit on the floor, thinking about how disgusting and rotten it actually is right as a pair of heavy boots stop in front of him, and a voice asks where he stole that apple from. The kid looks up completely frozen as he realizes he's been caught. Standing there is a knight looking down at him with a whip in hand, ready to deal out some serious punishment. The scene shifts to the cold stone walls of the castle courtyard. Later on, Seal is slumped against a brick wall in his hooded cloak, looking exhausted and covered in scratches. He just gives a weak laugh and says the guy really doesn't hold back, even when he's taking it out on a kid. Lucian reaches out toward the moon. His hand is covered in scars from a rough past while he says Lydia's name. He imagines Lydia being there when he was a kid. She tells him she wishes she could have protected him back then. Back in the present, he wonders if he'll ever be able to tell her the truth about his life, just like he did with Shannon. He keeps it all inside for now. The whole story of who Lucian Kirkcade actually is remains a secret. He breaks the silence by calling out to her. Lucian tells Lydia he got her a souvenir from his expedition. He wants to thank her for always taking such good care of him. He offers her a small package and asks if she'll take it. Lydia is blown away since no one has ever given her a gift before. She holds the gift tight and thanks him. She's so happy she can't stop smiling about it. Lucian just stands there watching her. He's got this soft, happy look on his face seeing how much she loves it. Lydia blushes and presses the gift against her cheek. She's clearly feeling a lot of affection for him right now. Lucian smiles and says he's glad she liked the gift, giving Lydia a gentle pat on the head while the moon hangs high over the house where they're spending the night. Lydia opens up the package and is completely floored by what's inside. It's a stunning, sparkly hair clip shaped like a flower sitting right there in the box. She just stares at it with stars in her eyes, saying it's the most beautiful thing she's ever seen. She picks it up carefully and slides it into her hair, then looks in the mirror and giggles, feeling pretty and clearly loving the new look. Later on, she goes to her drawer and pulls out a small jewelry box, tucking her new treasure away next to a simple ring she already owned. Looking back, Lydia notes this all happened shortly after she first got to the city, but then someone starts yelling for something to stop. Things take a bad turn in the alley as Lydia struggles to get away, dropping her groceries as she shouts for the guy to let her go. He's got a grip on her arm and won't back off, even when she asks who he thinks he is. His buddies just stand around laughing, telling her to pipe down and claiming they won't hurt her. But then, a voice from the dark cuts through the noise, asking what exactly is going on there. The guy holding her freezes up and looks over his shoulder, while Lydia just stares in total shock. It turns out that when she was cornered by these creeps, Lucian was the one who showed up to help. The thugs realize he's part of the legendary Leon's Roar Knights and immediately lose their minds. They start running for it, but Lucian isn't having it and tells them to stop right where they are. Lydia is still pretty shaken from the whole thing, barely able to catch her breath as she looks at him. Lucian's tough look softens for a second as he sees how scared she is. Lucian starts to apologize for not getting there sooner, But Lydia just breaks down, crying about how scary the whole thing was. She just loses it, sobbing and clutching onto his night uniform. Lucien looks down at her with this really soft, caring expression. He tells her everything is fine now, while gently patting her head to calm her down. Later on, things quiet down at the diner where Lydia works, and Lydia serves up a special plate of meatballs with jam and mashed potatoes. Lucien looks at the meal and says it looks really good. So Lydia tells him the meal is on the house as a way of saying thanks for saving her. Lucien picks up a meatball and thanks her for the food. He takes a bite, finally relaxing after their chaotic day. Lydia looks on with soft eyes, quietly agreeing as she takes in the moment. Lucien can't help but blush a little as he eats, telling her the food is delicious. Lydia says she's so happy to hear that, especially since this is the first time she's ever cooked for someone who actually finished the meal. She stands tall with a huge grin, telling Lucien he's officially the very first customer for the Lobelia diner. Lucien just stands there looking completely caught off guard by what she just said, but then his face softens into a really gentle, kind smile as he looks at her. He thinks to himself about how good the food is, feeling like it's filling up his heart just as much as his stomach. Then he casually mentions her cooking must have some kind of mysterious power, which totally shocks Lydia. Outside, the night is quiet over the diner, marking the real beginning of their story together, leaving Lydia to end the day in bed with a peaceful sigh, finally feeling happy. Merle is fast asleep, letting out little snores while Lydia thinks about how her shop might not be the cutest place, but it's hers. And she's just so happy to have all these people coming over to eat her food and actually becoming her friends. She lies back in bed, thinking about the gifts she's received lately, like the jewel from Lord Seal and the hair ornament from Lucien, realizing that on top of her mother's keepsake ring, she's somehow managed to find a whole bunch of other treasures. Lydia holds the ring up, staring at it with a peaceful look on her face as she relaxes, whispering to her mother in her heart that she's finally found real happiness here. Meanwhile, the night settles over a much larger, more imposing estate elsewhere, where goldfish swim lazily in a bowl inside one of the quiet rooms. A woman with long, light hair looks on with a sharp, knowing smile as a young girl stands before her, calling out to her as Mother Famine. Arjuna thinks about how Lydia fled the castle in total disgrace, and since Prince Stefan is completely under her spell, she's convinced everything is going perfectly. Mother Famine watches her, calling her a good boy while using her fake name, but then the mood shifts. Mother Famine points out that Arjuna hasn't actually managed to get the power of Saint Alexandria yet, giving her a sharp look while telling her she better not let her down. Arjuna clenches her fist tight, clearly feeling the pressure as she apologizes for the delay. She brings up some weird rumors from the capital about Lydia's cooking having magic, wondering if that holy beast has been hiding her sister's true power this whole time. She gets this frustrated look on her face, saying she can't believe a failure like her sister would actually have saintly powers. But Mother Famine just hums to herself, thinking about the mention of a sacred beast. She calls her by her real name, Arjuna, and says she has her doubts about the whole thing while her crystal ball starts to glow with a strange, bright light. A pair of sharp, cat-like eyes stare out from the shadows. Looks like Mother Famine is talking to someone who won't answer. She asks if she's getting the silent treatment, saying they're just as unsociable as they've always been. She holds up a glowing crystal ball and addresses the spirit inside as the holy beast Arjuna. She's frustrated because no matter how much she tortures the beast, it won't tell her the secret to the goddess's power. But the cat spirit just looks back at her from inside the glass. It calls her pathetic and tells her that someone like her could never actually get their hands on the holy maiden's power. Mother Famine just laughs it off, wondering who's actually the pathetic one. She reminds the beast that it's trapped and can't do anything, leaving it with no choice but to follow her orders. She turns her attention back to the girl standing nearby, asking if she feels the same way about things. She calls her sweet Francois, and the girl just looks back with a blank expression, simply agreeing with her. Francois bows low with her hand over her heart, promising that everything will go exactly how Mother Famine wants. She says she's going to make Prince Stefan fall for her since he has the divine ancestor's blood, and then she'll hand the whole country over to her mother. Mother Famine gives her a satisfied smile and calls her a good girl, confirming that's exactly what she's looking for. Arjuna's internal thoughts continue. She's obsessed with the wish of her precious mother, Sylphina, and how the red and white moons both hang over the Bernard kingdom. But it's the red one that matters most because that's where Sylphina is trapped. Arjuna feels for her, thinking about how she's imprisoned up there, blaming the divine ancestor and the goddess for banishing the witches. She swears she'll never forgive this land or its people, claiming that the mother's tears are actually just a physical form of all their resentment, and she's determined to steal the saint's power to give it to Sylphina. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Lydia stands there for a second, just catching her breath or thinking about what's next. Things have finally settled into a rhythm at the Lobelia diner. With more regulars showing up, the crew is used to the rush, and now summer has officially hit. Lydia is busy in the kitchen, explaining that the trick is boiling the pasta a bit longer before chilling it in ice water so it stays firm, and she pours the hot noodles straight into the cold water to get that perfect texture. Lydia starts tossing the ingredients together, mixing sweet cherry tomatoes and cheese with some olive oil and salt. She adds a quick squeeze of lemon to finish things off. It's basically the ultimate meal for beating the summer heat. She calls out to Margaret that the food is ready, showing off a plate of cold tomato jewel pasta that's packed with round sheep mozzarella and looking totally incredible. Margaret's eyes light up at the sight of it, and she gives Lydia a big thank you while mentioning how great the colors look. She says a dish like this feels like it could just blow the heat away. Lydia smiles back, explaining that since Margaret doesn't seem to handle the summer very well, she figured cold pasta was the best choice for lunch. Margaret sighs, admitting that she really hates being hot. She brings up how Tsukuyomi is always saying the heat back in Wakoku is way worse than Bernard, which makes Lydia realize that Wakoku must be absolutely brutal. Margaret says she can't even imagine it being hotter than this. She has zero interest in ever visiting a place like that, but Lydia looks pretty curious about it. She asks if Wakoku is that island nation across the sea, and seeing her reaction, Margaret asks if she's actually interested in going there. Lydia gets a bit quiet, thinking back on how her entire life was just moving between her family's estate, the academy, and the castle. It hits her that even after everything, she's never actually left the holy city. The thought of a trip across the sea catches Lydia off guard, and she repeats the idea back in surprise, because leaving the country sounds like a massive adventure to her. She gets a look in her eyes like she's ready to go, imagining all the rare ingredients and crazy dishes she'd find out there. Margaret looks at her, realizing that Lydia is totally unromantic. She asks if she ever thinks about going on a trip with a lover instead of just food, but Lydia just stands there looking completely blank, barely even processing what the word lover is supposed to mean. Margaret gives her a wink, pointing out that Lydia has actually been getting some pretty intense attention lately. She explains that when a guy gives a girl something to wear, it's his way of showing how possessive he is. Lydia just smiles and says the hair ornament is a souvenir from Lucien, and the apron was an apology from Seal. Margaret completely loses it, yelling that Lydia has zero romantic appeal, but then someone suddenly shouts Lydia's name from outside, and she immediately answers back. Margaret suddenly yells that summer is meant for love and vacations, catching Lydia totally off guard. Lydia stands there with her eyes wide as Margaret demands to know who she likes more between Seal and Lucien. Lydia doesn't miss a beat and clarifies that Seal is just a friend, while Lucien is nothing more than a regular customer. Lucien sighs and says it's a real shame she feels that way, making Margaret realize Lydia's love life has a long way to go. Lydia quickly tries to pivot the conversation, wanting to move on from the awkwardness. She tells Lucien to hurry up and eat before the cold pasta gets warm, and he agrees it would be a waste to wait. Lucien twirls a perfect forkful of the chilled noodles, sparkles practically coming off the dish as he lifts it. He takes a big bite and immediately lets out a happy sound, looking completely satisfied by the meal. He tells Lydia the food is incredible, especially with how refreshing the cold noodles and crisp lemon scent feel. Lucien says the heat usually kills his appetite, but the sweet tomato and spicy pepper kick make this something he could eat forever. Lydia stands there with a huge smile on her face, looking at the food she's prepared. She starts thinking about how her cooking seems to have this weird power to break curses and heal animals. But even if she didn't have any special magic like that, she'd still be perfectly happy just being a cook. As Shannon digs into her meal, talking about how great it is to eat such delicious food. Lydia watches everyone eat and says the best part of the job is just seeing her customers look so happy, which makes Margaret smile. She remembers when Lydia used to give her food depressing names like bath coffin or cheating, and she's just glad the girl has finally bounced back. Lydia keeps that positive vibe going, thinking about how much fun cooking is and how good food brings people joy. Later on, the scene shifts to a busy market street where everyone is out shopping by the water, and Lydia eventually has to take a break on a bench. She lets out a tired sigh, mentioning she hasn't been out to the market in forever and it totally drained her. She pulls a little treat out for Merle, reminding the rabbit they're in public as the little creature happily munches away. Lydia tries to get Merle to behave, telling him to get out of the bag since it's bad manners, but the little guy just chirps and laughs it off, leaving Lydia just sighing at how stubborn he's being while they walk. They pass by a sunny beach where kids are running around in the sand, and a mom is watching her son play right where the waves are crashing down on the shore. Lydia stops for a second to just stare out at the sparkling blue water, mentioning how nice the ocean looks and how much she'd love to go for a swim. But when she asks Merle if he's down, he doesn't seem interested at all, so she gives up on the beach and heads into the busy market instead. She finds a fruit stall and tells the girl working there that she'll take some lemons and a watermelon, Even though the girl warns her it's going to be a heavy walk back, Lydia just says it looks way too delicious to pass up. She starts getting hyped, explaining how she's going to hollow the whole thing out and fill it with syrup and ice to make a fruit pool. Lydia is getting all excited about her haul, saying they should use a ton of honey syrup with the lemons to make some refreshing lemonade, and the girl at the stall thinks that sounds amazing, so Lydia tells her she's gotta come over and try some once it's ready. The girl agrees she'd love to, but then she stops and looks at Lydia with a pretty worried expression, wondering if she's actually okay carrying all that weight. Lydia is sweating and struggling with the giant melon but says she'll push through for the sake of a good meal, so she starts wobbling away while the girl tells her to be careful, with Lydia just shouting back that she's fine as she stumbles down the street. As she walks, she starts daydreaming about Merle, suddenly growing into a giant, thinking about how much easier life would be if she could just ride on his back. But her little fantasy gets cut short when she spots something ahead that makes her stop. Looking down a quiet side path, she sees two people standing close together and talking, and as she gets a better look, she realizes one of them is Lucian, and he's acting all serious with a woman in a hood. Lydia just stands there frozen with her watermelon, totally caught off guard seeing Lucian out in public with another woman. Lydia starts thinking about all those rumors she heard regarding Lucian being a player, and realizes it's her first time actually seeing him out with someone. She's standing there pouting with Merle, looking totally annoyed about the whole thing. She stays hidden behind a stone wall, clutching her watermelon while she watches Lucian and the hooded woman walk away, telling herself she isn't actually curious because following them would be weird. But then she justifies it by saying they're just heading toward her house. She keeps insisting to herself that she's definitely not sneaking around or anything like that. But then she peeks around the corner and lets out a little gasp when she sees that they're just gone. She stands there with Merle, looking completely confused and wondering where they could have disappeared to so fast. She's standing in front of this massive, creepy-looking estate with an iron gate, and there's no sign of them anywhere. Crows are circling the roof and making a bunch of noise over the old chimneys, making the whole place feel super eerie. The big house just sits there in the dark, looking totally abandoned and mysterious. Lydia stands in front of the creepy old house clutching her watermelon, asking Merle if this is really the place they were looking for. Lucian leans in with a shady look on his face, telling her that people call this place the haunted house because of the ghost. Lydia is already starting to freak out, letting out a little noise as she listens to the scary details. Lucian explains that even though the mansion is supposed to be empty, people still hear weird noises and see dim lights inside late at night. A dark silhouette moves past one of the dusty windows, matching the stories about a shadow figure that wanders the halls alone. And it turns out this isn't just one person's imagination, since the whole town has been gossiping about the place lately. Lucian says the house used to belong to a rich merchant who lost his business, and he ended up taking his own life right there because of his debts. He tells her the merchant's spirit never left, and Lydia is looking pretty pale as she hears that the ghost still appears in the mansion. The story gets even worse as Lucian describes the ghost begging for money and cursing anyone who enters, which sends Lydia into a total panic. She yells at him for sharing such a scary story so close to her shop, but Lucian just jokes that telling ghost stories is the best part of summer. Lydia snaps at Lucian, reminding him he just said summer was supposed to be about love. He just plays dumb and asks if he really said that, teasing her while the creepy mansion stands right there behind the heavy iron gates, looking like something out of a nightmare. Lydia is shaking like crazy while clutching her watermelon, trying to tell herself that everything she's feeling is just her imagination. But she figures she's only seeing scary stuff because she's thinking about Lucian's stories. She tells herself she's got to hurry home before the front door of the mansion suddenly creaks open. She stops in her tracks, wondering what that noise was, and then she sees a foot step out onto the stone floor. She lets out a tiny noise, completely frozen as a dark silhouette appears in the doorway. The figure starts making these weird, low-breathing sounds that send a chill down her spine, and Lydia just loses it. She closes her eyes and starts screaming, terrified that the ghost from the stories is actually there. She starts apologizing like crazy, begging the ghost not to curse her and explaining she's just a broke girl passing by. But then the figure suddenly says her name. Lydia stops mid-panic and looks up with tears still in her eyes, completely stunned to hear a familiar voice coming from the dark. Seal stands there looking calm as ever, while Lydia's voice trembles, barely able to believe she's actually seeing Lord Seal standing right in front of her. She's completely red in the face and keeps repeating his name, totally stunned by the surprise. Seal just gives her a gentle smile and says her name while reaching out to comfort her. Lydia starts bawling his name at the top of her lungs, and Seal apologizes for scaring her, explaining he saw her from inside the house. Lydia tries to explain her panic, saying Margaret told her a merchant's ghost haunted the place after a tragic end. But Seal clears it up, saying the guy just went broke and left in the night without any drama. He adds that he even told Margaret he bought the house himself, which makes Lydia realize her friend was just messing with her the whole time. She stands there looking pretty annoyed while Seal admits he should have told her he moved in sooner, but he's just been way too busy unpacking, and then they both look down and realize her watermelon is totally smashed on the pavement. Seal feels bad and says it's his fault for scaring her. He offers to buy her a new watermelon tomorrow and bring it to her personally, but Lydia just smiles and tells him it wasn't his fault, so he shouldn't worry about it. Seal starts to say something else, but Lydia cuts him off, saying she has a better idea since she can't exactly take a smashed watermelon back to the diner. So she suggests they just cut off the dirty parts and eat it together right now. She asks if he even likes watermelon, and Seal looks a little embarrassed as he admits he's actually never had it before. Lydia's eyes light up, and she gets super excited that she gets to be the one to give him his first taste of it, telling him how sweet and refreshing it is, while Seal just watches her with a slight blush on his face. They head inside the house where all the furniture is still tucked away under white dust sheets and walk into the kitchen to get everything ready. Lydia grabs a knife and a cutting board, ready to save the best parts of the fruit. Lydia lets out a huge gasp when she sees what's in the kitchen. She can't believe he has a perfectly good knife and cutting board ready to go. She asks Seal if he actually cooks for himself and tells him she's seriously impressed, but Seal starts sweating and stammers out a correction. He tells her that he doesn't really cook, and that he actually just uses those tools for his monster research. Lydia just stares at him with a totally blank look, repeating the words monster research, while Seal tries to laugh off the awkward vibe. He starts panicking even more and promises her that he's definitely eating the food they made together, while Lydia just sighs and says she's going to pretend she didn't hear that last part. She figures it's better if she doesn't think too hard about what else that knife has touched. A little later, everything is set up with some tea and the freshly sliced watermelon, and Merle even joins them at the table. Lydia picks up a piece and gets all excited, saying it looks delicious and perfectly ripe. Seal just stands there holding his slice, still looking a bit unsure about the whole thing until he finally leans in and takes a big bite of the fruit, and his eyes immediately light up as he realizes just how good it actually tastes. Seal takes his first bite and is totally blown away, saying it's delicious and that he's never had fruit this sweet. Lydia just beams at him, looking really happy that he's actually enjoying the treat she prepared. She lets him in on a little secret, telling him that watermelons are actually vegetables, which completely shocks him. He can't believe it since they're so sweet, but Lydia just laughs and says it's surprising. Even little Merle is having the time of its life with the snack. Lydia asks if it's good, and the little creature just chirps back with sparkly eyes. The group settles in for a nice, quiet tea time together to wash down the fruit. While they sip their tea, Seal gets a bit more serious and says he wants to formally invite her to his place once he has everything ready. He really wants to get a closer look at her magic. Lydia agrees, reminding him they did make a promise to look into the curse of the moon that the mages have been keeping quiet about. While she thinks about that weird disease that makes people go violent out of nowhere, she's really hoping that her specific powers might be the key to curing it. At least, that seems to be exactly what Seal is counting on as he watches her. Lydia thanks him for the offer, but Seal lets her know it's still going to be a little while before they can get started with the official preparations. Lydia tells Seal she's totally fine with waiting. She even offers to help him with chores like cleaning and weeding, and Seal just smiles, telling her to let him know whenever she needs anything since helping a friend is just what you do. He says he'll definitely be there if she ever gets into trouble. Lydia beams at him, agreeing that having friends you can count on really is the best feeling. The scene moves over to a massive stone building known as the Michael White Moon Disease Sanatorium, where rows of patients are resting in their beds inside the quiet hospital ward. Seal and Levis show up at the facility, walking through the stone halls in their dark mage's cloaks. As they're walking, a little girl holding a stuffed bunny and a maid stop right in their tracks. The girl recognizes them immediately and gives a big smile, saying hello to both Seal and Levis. Seal stops to talk to the kid, calling her Olivia and asking how she's doing today. She looks up at him looking really happy, saying she feels great and just got back from a walk outside.